everybody out there, this is the franchise, Shane Douglas, telling you that when you want the lowdown, the best, the very bottom line of professional wrestling information, you got to listen right here. Interactive interview.
Shane, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. How you guys doing today?
Oh, we're doing great. It's been our goal since day one to get you on the program. We can't tell you how grateful we are that you decided to come on the program and give us this time.
Well, cool. Hopefully we can get some earth-shattering stuff going here for you guys. Make it interesting for your listeners.
Thank you very much. Well, we're not going to start with the most interesting question, but the first question is, were you a wrestling fan growing up?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up, you always hear these people today talking about old school and new school. I grew up watching what is classically known as the old school, the Bruno Sammartinos and the Playboy Buddy, or the Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, and then in Pittsburgh here, in the local station, the NBC affiliate, we would get the Batman and Haystacks Calhoun and just all the great names you learn from yesteryear, And so I grew up in Smitten. When I was 5 years old, I started wrapping a towel around my neck and jumping off the couch playing Batman from the wrestling, not Batman the TV show, but Batman the Wrestler, and I've been smitten by it really ever since.
When did you decide that wrestling would be something you wanted to do? Was there any particular match or incident?
No, actually, wrestling was, and I hate to sound so coy on it because it sounds sort of condescending to the wrestling business. I'll start by saying, like I just mentioned in the earlier question, I love and have always loved the professional wrestling show and aspect of it, and the athleticism and the choreography and the acting and the colors. It was just something as a child, the first image I remember really having of wrestling that really caught my eye was Superstar Billy Graham. He had the wrap down. He had the the tan to a 7-year-old kid. Here's these 21, 22-inch arms and this tan and these tie-dyed colors, and the Ernie, the Grand Wizard, his manager, being the mouthpiece and cutting those great promos. I was absolutely caught by it. So it was not something I never planned on doing because I didn't like it. I just never planned on being a wrestler because it seemed like something for a kid that grew up in Pulaski Township, Pennselsvania. It has one stop sign. We don't have our own police force here, So to grow up in a podunk place like this, very, very quiet, very, calm, backwood type of place, the wrestling seemed like a million miles away. It seemed like it would be easier to hit the lotto than it would be to become a professional wrestler. So I had planned on the traditional thing like most young kids and go to college and make my fame and fortune somehow being a political scientist somewhere. And, when I graduated from college in 1986, excuse me, there were a plethora of jobs out there for people in the political science field, and I had, of course, wrestled my way through college. That was how I paid, one of the ways that I paid for my college degree. And along came Eddie Gilbert and Bill Watts, who had offered me a job at that time to go to the old, now defunct GWF. And I took it, not because I wanted to be a wrestler or didn't want to be a wrestler, but because it was a job and I had loans that were going to be coming due very shortly. So I took it, and planning that my thinking at that time was, this is something I'll do until I can find a job in my field. And here I am 20-some years later, still searching for my field. And I think wrestling has become my field.
Many fans have submitted questions. Basically, you just mentioned that your college background and that, but many fans have submitted questions just wanting sort of more information on your actual education. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, I've got a pretty extensive educational background, and there are times that I keep myself at the rear end for not using it more. I started off, I went to college, my bachelor's degree. I have a Bachelor of Arts in History and Political Science, double major, and then with a minor in management. And then I went on after that and got my master's in education to be certified to teach. And then after I started teaching, I realized I didn't like that. I went back to one of my first loves, something I planned on being since I was a kid, and sort of moved away from. I had a chemistry teacher in high school that was really pretty much an ass. And he liked to flirt with the girls and the guys he gave bad grades to. And at the time, I was a realist. I've always been a realist. And I used to think to myself, God, if I came and passed this high school chemistry class with anything more than a C, I'll get blown out of the water in med school. And so I stopped, my desire to be a doctor sort of waned. And, again, I was placing the heat on me. I was saying, man, if Troy Martin's too dumb to get anything more than a C in high school history, how can he possibly pass med school? So I talked myself out of med school. And in 1991, my dad became very ill with emphysema and later lung cancer. I was his only son, so I would travel with him to the hospital. He wouldn't go with anybody but me. And I would take him into the rooms to get these procedures done called a thoracentesis, which anybody that knows what this is, I feel bad for, because it means that somebody they know and love is in a really bad state of health. And what they do is they stick a needle into the back, into the pleural sac, which surrounds the lungs, and they draw fluid off the lungs so they can breathe. If you want to try to get an idea of what it's like to breathe when you have COPD or emphysema, take a balloon, go into the swimming pool, go underwater about 4 or 5 feet and try to blow the balloon up. That's what it's like for people that have that to breathe in until they get that fluid taken off their lungs.
Wow.
So I would go and watch this, and my wife went in one time, and I saw her wincing. It was really bothering her to watch this, and I told me later that she actually almost got sick. And she asked me how I could watch it, and I told her, I'd never pretty much told anybody except my mother that I'd wanted to be a doctor. And my wife at that point never knew. And I told her, I said, I wanted to be a doctor. That stuff just really enthralls me. I'm intrigued by it all. And, that's what started the ball rolling when she said to me, well, if you're so intrigued, why not go back and do it? And so I thought, well, why not? At the time, ECW hadn't yet taken off. This is in the early 90s. I had 2 experiences, one really bad with WCW and a so-so experience with WWF, and really was beginning to think that it was time for me to move on with my life's ambitions. So I started back to school at the same time I was teaching. So now I'm teaching school 5 days a week, wrestling for ECW on the weekends, and taking classes during the week and weekends whenever I could squeeze them in for med school, and taking classes like organic chemistry and biochemistry and anatomy and physiology 1 and 2, microbiology. I just loved it, and got straight A's in every class except organic chem, which I got a B in, which I was sort of disappointed, but was accepted at medical school in 1993, and I was 2 weeks from from leaving from medical school, a school called Saba in the Dutch Netherlands, Antilles. It's a English-speaking island. They teach in English, totally certified here in the States. And the reason I chose that school was because they had a little bit faster paced program. Plus, they cater to the older, non-traditional student, which I certainly was in 1993. And I was 2 weeks away from going, and Paul Heyman came up to me and offered me a new contract, which is right around the time that ECW began to percolate a little bit, started getting some real steam behind it. And at the time of the contract, it was pretty much impossible for me to say no to and walk away from. And so I stayed with the wrestling. And now, in hindsight, if the old saying, if you knew then what you know now, I certainly wouldn't have gone to medical school. But life isn't that luxurious that we have that type of prescience. So it's unfortunately I stuck with the wrestling, and but I'm not one to cry over certain things like what you've done. You make decisions in your life and you live with them. I'm very proud of what I've accomplished in wrestling. I'm very proud of been honored to have a career where I've been able to entertain some fans, and so for me that it's just as rewarding as if I would have gone to medical school. The nice thing about luxury about medical school would have been the long-termness of it. I could have taken care of my family. I'm at a point now at 40 where I'm ready to start moving out of the ring. I don't want to stay past my welcome.
How would you feel about people that are still in training, obviously, to take a career in pro wrestling? Do you feel that getting a good education behind them is a key factor in basically what they should do before they actually try and become a wrestler?
I think it should be a prerequisite for anybody in the year 2004 to get some sort of advanced degree, whether it's in college or trade school or something, because back whenever I was a kid, you could graduate from high school and go to work in a steel mill and make $50,000 a year, which back then was $1 million to people that had no education. And it was commonplace where I grew up. This was a steel belt, and it was commonplace for people around here to have no high school degree, no diploma, and they'd be working in the steel mill, busting their asses, mind you, but still working on the steel mill. And they'd have 2 cars in the garage and swimming pool in the backyard, and all the kids in college, and so they made a great living. And unfortunately, the bottom was to fall out of that because they were so way overpaid for what the job entailed, and countries overseas could do it a lot cheaper. So it was unfortunate. We saw a huge shift in that. But I think what the moral that taught me was, where Dominic Finucci told me he wouldn't train me until I got an education, the impetus was already there for me to get that, because I had seen a lot of relatives, uncles and nephews and brother-in-laws and friends that have gone through the steel mills and ended up, with no job and no security. So, it was really, for me, just the wise thing to do to get an education.
I think you just said it, but who did train you for wrestling?
Dominic Finucci. And, Bruno Sammartino to a little bit lesser degree. Bruno never trained us hands-on, but Bruno would periodically stop by and give us pointers and, teach us certain things about the wrestling business.
What memories do you have of your first match?
My first professional match was sort of crazy how it would foretell of things to come, because my first professional wrestling match was, as far as my career, I started having wrestling matches back when I was a kid. We would put on backyard carnivals, but after having been trained to be a wrestler, my actual first true wrestling match was on Thanksgiving Day of 1982, and I wrestled with Dominic Finucci as my partner. It was me and him against Bigfoot and Bill Berger in Fairmont, West Virginia. I made $14.50, and it was a barbed wire match. So sort of weird and foretelling where my career would end up going, and me, of course, making my name in ECW, which was, Bloodbath City. I'm proud of the fact that I wasn't one of those guys that bled on every single bump into the doorknob and bled. I think ECW became almost became a caricature of itself, because it was so crisp and awesome at the beginning, but it became so formulaic at the end. Okay, the match is drawing to a slow down here, so let's grab a chair, or let's break a table, or swing a stick, and it became so overdone, and so many people were bleeding in the matches that blood meant nothing anymore, and I think ECW folded under the weight of its own success.
Of course, one of the hardcore legends of the industry is Mick Foley, and you seem to break in together, but what kind of thoughts do you have on Mick's style of wrestling?
On his style of wrestling?
Yeah.
I commend anybody that's able to make a name for themselves in this business, because it's a very difficult business to do that in. There's so many, everything has been done, every gimmick has been done to futility, every angle has been conceived and thought of, and we'll begin to see now the dryness of some of the angles that Vince is coming up with, because everything they've done, has been done before, and so now they're reaching for the ridiculous and the absurd. But for Mick, I'm proud of him that he's never go out and do that. Where I have my problems with what Mick has done is he's basically allowed himself to be crippled up to somewhat enrich himself and his family, and I'm sure he's made a very good living at what he's done, and I know Mick is better than 2 coats of paint, so he's probably saved every dime he's made. But he's really he's crippled himself to enrich somebody else. And when I heard the interview where his wife was saying that he's getting lost on the way home from the airport, that made me concerned for Mick's well-being. Mick's a great guy. I sometimes think he's become too much a product of the business and lost sight of who he was then and what he's become. But, that be it as it may, that's a different subject. I'm concerned about Mick Foley, the man. And, he's got, I think 4 kids now. And when you start losing your way home from the airport, not able to find your way home at, late 30s at best. I know Mick's younger than me. I don't know exactly how old, but I know he's younger than me. And, to be losing your way, to be getting lost on the way home from the airport at that age is scary. And I hope that's something that's temporary, not long-term, but the beating that he placed on his body could lead to nothing good, nothing positive.
We recently had Missy Hyatt on the show, and we always do word associations later in the show, but she took credit for Sheen Eddie coming up with the name Shane Douglas. We always do, like I said, we always do word associations at the end of the show, but first name on the list is Missy Hyatt.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you that that's a true story. She and Eddie did come up with the name. Eddie came up with Shane. He wanted to call me either Shane or Cody. And when I chose, I thought Shane sounded a little bit better, seemed to fit me a little more. So when I chose that, we sat around and 5 or 10 minutes and threw names back and forth. And out of the blue, he said, "How about Shane Douglas?" And it was the first name that sounded right together. And so we went with that. So that is a true story. As far as Missy Hyatt goes, I consider her to be a friend because I've known her so long in the business. I got her back whenever I was a kid. She was barely older than me, so she was a kid. And, we both had the connection because of Eddie. She, of course, was married to him. Eddie gave me my break in the business. And so I have fond memories of her back then. To me, as far as word association goes, when I think of Missy Hyatt, I think of the first pretty girl in wrestling. The first really hot-looking chick.
And how about the man you defeated for the UWF title, Eddie Gilbert?
Eddie Gilbert was, to me, was my key into the business. There's a lot of talented people who are trying to break into this business, and most of them never make it. Eddie Gilbert saw me in Cactus and Mick Foley wrestling on a tour up here of Ohio, and he instantly saw something in the two of us. And, it turns out that Eddie was right. I mean, at that time, we probably stunk to high heaven. But Eddie saw something in the two of us that he knew that later we had the potential to become stars. And so he gave me my break. I was going to bring both of us in at the same time. And, from my understanding later, Bill Watts told me to bring one at a time. So he brought me in first. And several months later, 3 or 4 months later, when he was ready to bring Mick in, the door got closed. The company had been sold to Crockett. And Crockett froze all hiring. So Mick ended up going through a little bit different journey where he later had to go through Memphis and Japan and other places before he finally got his foot in the door. But as far as Eddie Gilbert goes, I'll be eternally thankful to him, and I miss him because he was a great guy. He was a tremendous, tremendous performer in this business. He's one of those rare guys that gets it. He understands it and understands how to make it work. And I'll be eternally grateful to him because of him giving me a break.
Of course, we're on the topic of UWF, and that was one of the main topics that fans submitted questions about. So they wanted to know basically what are your memories overall for your time in the UWF?
Yeah, my memories of the place are of a tremendous company. I mean, I've always and often said publicly, I believe that UWF was the predecessor to ECW. It broke the doors open. It broke the ground to allow a company like ECW to later exist. If you go back and look at those tapes and put them into context, by today's standards, they're pretty mild. But if you go back and put it into the context of 1983, 4, 5, around in there someplace, back whenever, arm bars and hip thrusters were the standard, here suddenly came a company, where Bill Watts was being buried under the flag, and, the Freebirds were running rampant over people, and, Eddie Gilbert, was playing his shenanigans and with Hot Stuff International and, Skandor Akbar, the typical Middle Eastern heel. It was a tremendous, tremendous show. It had so many strong points that if you go back now and look at the you talk about like 6 degrees of separation to Kevin Bacon. Go back and look at 6 degrees or 6 steps from UWF and look at all the stars that are in the business today. I'd venture to say that probably if you pick out the top 50 wrestlers in the business in the last 20 years, probably 45 of them went through UWF or were seasoned there. Ted DiBiase, the Freebirds, Eddie Gilbert, Terry Taylor, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Dr. Death, Steve Williams. The list just goes on and on and on of people that were there and had gone through there and had been big stars there and later on been big stars for WWF and WCW. And I'm just really excited and proud of the fact that I got my foot in the door. That's where I made my break in the business and learned a lot by working with all those guys. And I was very, very fortunate.
How did you feel about the Crockett takeover of the UWF?
Well, at the time, we were sort of excited about it. Bill Watts had gotten himself into trouble financially by trying to go too big too fast. And the outcome of that was financial disaster. So the alternative would have been, if Crockett hadn't bought it, the alternative would have been closure. And none of us wanted that. We wanted to see the legacy of the company continue and move forward. Unfortunately, what we were hoping for, the old saying, be careful what you wish for because you might get it. Well, we were wishing that Crockett bought it to make it, to basically save it. But little did we know at the time that the reason he was buying it was to break the back of his competitor. He couldn't compete compete in the same markets as UWF. Anytime there were shows running markets that were that we were in contest with them, we would blow them out of the water. They had a real tough time drawing, through the Oklahoma, Texas, Mid-South area, over in Louisiana and places like that. They were just doing terribly. So Crockett's vision was to come in and buy this hot company and then squash it, shut it down, and basically force the fans in those areas to watch us or nobody. Just a totally crap business move on his part. What I would have done if I bought it, I would have kept it and run it as a separate entity. I mean, who cares what the name on the door is, as long as the receipts are going in my pocket. And, I think they could have had some really strong potential of great angles, NWA versus UWF, especially considering that at the time the standard bearer in the business, the rule, the measuring stick of success was Ric Flair. And, to take that kind of company and put it against, NWA was a wrestling company, to put it against a company that was wrestling, but, that edgy product like UWF was could have been great, tremendous business. But he made the mistake. Ironically, I remember Vince McMahon going out and basically, skewing Jim Crockett for making such a stupid move as that. And about 15, 20 years later, Vince McMahon made a bigger, more stupid move by doing the exact same thing, buying out the WCW, when he could have basically had, the long dreamt of and long sought after, the elusive Super Bowl of wrestling. I mean, imagine the angles, the matches that could have been had: Goldberg versus Austin, Kevin Nash versus the Giant, Sting versus whomever, the microwave could have been done at me versus The Rock. I mean, this could have been an incredibly lucrative, incredibly powerful and entertaining angle. And instead, Vince McMahon proving that it was too cheap to buy the contracts to allow that type of thing to happen. I've got to believe that whatever would cost him in dollars and cents to buy those contracts to make it happen
would have been made back.
Been surpassed by receipts, absolutely.
Right, absolutely.
Who came up with the idea of you teaming up with Johnny Ace and calling yourself the Dynamic Dudes?
Well, the idea was Eddie Gilbert to team us. We were friends on the road. We traveled together. We would often get in the ring and work out together before the matches. And somebody in the office obviously saw that and decided that they wanted to go with it. The problem with it was the original intention of the Dynamic Dude tag team, the teaming of Shane Douglas and Johnny Ace, was to be an updated version of the Rockers. The Rockers were getting a little bit long in the tooth at that time, a little bit over the hill. And they had also had a tag team called the New Breed, which was real, like, ultra-modern, a little bit over the top. And the idea was to have two guys that came in that would appeal to the young girls, because that demographic was being lost rapidly by the Rock and Roll Express, moving up in years. So they wanted to bring in a tag team that would appeal to young girls, but they could also wrestle. One thing about the Rock and Roll Express was those two guys could go. I mean, they knew how to make it work in the ring. Johnny Ace and I, on the other hand, at that point, I was more seasoned than Johnny at the time, but I was still green. And Johnny was greener than goose shit at the time. So you had two guys in the ring that basically were trying to feel their way around to learn what they were doing, and suddenly you put them in an angle with guys like Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. And quite frankly, we couldn't hold up our end of the bargain. I mean, we couldn't get in the ring and compete with those guys. We were still learning. And that goes back to the whole thing of me railing against the Flairs and those guys, because they voraciously held on to that knowledge and wouldn't give it up. And that was one of the reasons why a tag team like that couldn't work and wouldn't work and didn't work. But, it's an interesting sidebar, to a little trivia to it, was the Dynamic Dudes weren't originally envisioned as a team called the Dynamic Dudes. We started off, in fact, we wrestled on a televised pay-per-view called the Johnny and Shane, the New Generation. And it was supposed to be that cross between the Rockers and the New Breed. And we actually wrestled against the Samoan SWAT team in Nashville. If you go back and look at that tape, as the New Generation. And it was the next day at the airport, on the way to the airport, that Eddie Gilbert, released a new name to us. Now you had to know Eddie. Eddie was a ripper. And Eddie gets in the car and tells us, "Why did you hear your new name?" And when he told it to us, I started laughing, because first of all, we had been on television last night, a nationally televised pay-per-view the night before. that we were announced as Johnny and Shane, the new generation. So I had no doubts in my mind this had to be a rib. I mean, certainly, they're not going to change the name of the tag team after it's already been announced.
Right.
And, well, I was wrong. That was one of the first of many bad moves by WCW. The thinking on the name was by Jim Herd. This just shows, this is one of those cases where you have the lecture in business class about bad business moves, and this is one of them. This is one of the classic bad business moves of all time. Wharton Business School, she used this as a lesson plan because they had conducted a study, they being Time Warner, CNN, whoever it was at that time, I forget who owned the company at that time, but somebody in that corporate giant had commissioned a study in California, with the thought being that all hip modern trends start in California and move eastward. And there's probably some validity to that, but it's not certainly an altruism or anything like that. And they had commissioned this study, and they found out the two biggest, most commonly used phrases of excitement were "Hey, dude," and "That's dynamic." And so they decided, Jim Herd, in his infinite wisdom as a pizza executive, decided he'll take the two top words and put them together and call somebody the Dynamic Dudes. And, little did he understand the heat of that performance. I mean, the guys, this tag team was meant to appeal to girls, but it was also meant, because of the new breed aspect of it, that edgy aspect, was meant to appeal to guys as well. Guys who, hey, Johnny and Shane kicked these guys' asses. Or the girls say, man, Johnny and Shane are cute, and they rip their pants off. But that was the whole point, was it was supposed to appeal to a wide range of people, a wide demographic. Well, as soon as you called it the Dynamic Dudes, you made it silly to half the girls, except the very young girls. And the guys couldn't stand it. It was a little bitty feminine to name, the Dynamic Dudes. So it was dead from the start. And but again, Eddie Gilbert, being the student of this game as he was, using the old Dusty Rhodes phrase of let's make lemonade, out of lemons.
Right.
Let's turn chicken soup into chicken salad. And what he did was he decided to come out, and he was one of the first people that saw in Shane Douglas a heel waiting to get out of that babyface shell. And he decided he wanted to put it together when he was the assistant booker at the time. He wanted to put Johnny and Shane out there in long flowing black robes with our hair, blonde hair slicked back and pulled back even the ponytails or just combed straight back. With a bit of that Fargo strut, walking to the ring and go from there with him being the manager of this team, which would have been great for us because he could have taught us night to night, could have helped, with calling us spots and stuff in the ring and, teaching us, and it would have really worked. And I think, knowing how much heat the team had, I used to get physically ill going to places like Philadelphia because it was just brutal. It was no fun at all to perform there. The fans were just so. That would have been one of them. If I was in the stands, I'd have been doing the same thing. But, there's a funny little sidebar about the Dynamic Dudes thing. I just learned to roll the punches after a while. It was funny to me after a while because it was just so corny and ridiculous, over the top, stupid. You had to laugh or you cried because it was so bad. And we were in Philadelphia working with Bobby Eaton and Stanley in the Midnight Express.
Right.
And Johnny was to start the match off, and he gets in the ring and he circles around with Bobby Eaton. And Bobby pushes him off, and I can see Bobby is, physically laughing out loud. But Stan is on the apron. He's laughing. Tears running down his face. Cornette's on the floor, and he's trying to cover his face with his tennis racket, and he's laughing. Well, Johnny turns around and he goes, tag in. So I put my hand up in the stands to my right. So I look up in the third tier to my right in Philadelphia, and there's a sign that, no exaggeration, is 4 feet by 8 foot, in bright fluorescent pink letters that says, Johnny sucks Shane's. And there was enough words at the end there. I don't know how family-oriented your show is, so I'll leave that up to the imagination of your listeners. And we get back to the back, and Johnny was so upset, and he said to me, didn't that piss you off? And I said, well, because you were sucking me, I wasn't so mad at you. If Shane was sucking you, I'd have been pretty pissed off. So it was one of those things. The funny part about the whole thing with the Dynamic Dudes is it was the first time that I made real money in this business. We had a guaranteed contract. And, so people think, they always try to bring it up to me. And, because everybody has something in the past of this business they're embarrassed of. And people always bring it up, and I don't laugh about it. I laughed all the way to the bank with that gimmick. I would go back to that in a heartbeat. as compared to a lot of other times in my history, like in 1995 when I started with the WWF. For me, a lot of fun with the thing, but also a lot of learning experience.
And we're still here with Shane Douglas, of course. Thank you, Shane. We're now going to quickly roll into a commercial. Hope you don't mind waiting while we quickly roll this NWA TNA commercial. You can see Shane and many other superstars on there every Wednesday night.
Bored with the same old wrestling? Then you need to see 2 hours of TNA total non-stop action wrestling. With legendary names, today's superstars, and the extreme athletes of the X Division, TNA. Total non-stop action wrestling. Wednesday nights.
Catch hard-hitting wrestling action Wednesday nights on In Demand.
Welcome back to the Interactive Interviews Anniversary and WrestleMania edition. We're still here with the franchise, Shane Douglas. Why did you leave WCW to go to the WWF? This was in 1991.
1990. Actually, there was an incident. I had blown my knee out working in a match with Bobby Eaton. I used to do a thing where I would drop kick Bobby Eaton to the floor as he took the bump out. I would vault, and I would run from one side of the ring and together, and with one step, vault to the top turnbuckle, and then cross body out to the floor onto Bobby. And Bobby was tremendous to work with. You could always come and be in the right place. But this building was a little building in West Virginia, and at that particular building, because it was so small, they had to squeeze more seats in. They had to squeeze the sides of the pads on the floor and the railings in close to make more room. Well, when they did that, I didn't realize until I was already in the air, but I overshot the pads. And during the course, just one of those unlucky things that during the course of the match, my knee pad had slid down on my right knee. And as Bobby hit me, Bobby was, a pretty strong guy, deceptively strong for how he looked, but still is a 230-pound guy coming from 15 feet in the air. I hit him and he would collapse. Well, when I hit him and he collapsed, my knee, bare knee, with no pad on it, drilled into the concrete and, tore it up a little bit. I ended up having to have surgery on it, arthroscopic surgery, and was out for like 6 weeks. So, during the 6 weeks, the entire time that I'm off, I'm getting phone calls from, just about everybody in the office. Jim, I distinctly remember Jim Ross because he was the head of the committee, being the one that was on the phone just about every day to me, and every time I talked to him, he would bury guys like Sting and Luger and, talk about how overpaid they are and underworked, and they bitch and moan about everything, and just really heavy on these guys, and kept saying that, we don't need tag teams right now, we need some individual players that are going to work for the company and help get the company ahead, and, just really going overboard about this thing about how much they're going to use me as a single whenever I get back. And so it comes time for me to get back off the road. My first day back was in Baton Rouge. I'm saying hello to everybody walking on. It's time for dinner, and I get on and grab something to eat. Well, Missy High comes walking down, and she sees the tables open, so she asks if she can sit down. I tell her yes. She sits down. She was announcing at that time. I was doing something with the announce team, so she was in the production meeting. She came down and she goes, "Boy, how did you piss everybody off in the committee so fast? She just got back." So what are you talking about? She said, "I just left the production meeting. Everybody was talking crap on you. They were really burying you in that meeting." I'm thinking, what the hell could I possibly have done wrong? I've been on for 6 weeks. Getting phone calls from the office. I think I couldn't possibly have done anything wrong, So, she tells me this, and a few minutes later, Teddy Long comes up to me and tells me that they want me to work with Mark Callis. This is before The Undertaker.
Right.
And I said, what do they want for the finish? He said, about 3 minutes, squash job, hard punch, 1, 2, 3. Now, at the time, you have to understand that there was a whole lot of power struggle going on in the company. Bookers were not doing what was being sent to them by the office, and just stuff like that. A lot of, it could only happen in wrestling. Nobody in any of the business would dare to usurp the boss like that, but in this business, of course, it's second nature. So with that being, well known in the dressing room, And, me hearing this after, Jim Herd's been on the phone with me for 6 weeks and Jim Ross and everybody else telling me how much they want to push me as a single, this doesn't add up. My first show back to squash me in the middle of the ring just doesn't seem right to me.
Right.
So I go find Jim Ross, and Jim Ross comes out, and I tell him, I said, Jim, I can't do that. What the hell's going on? He's going, no, that stupid son of a bitch. And, and he used some pretty colorful language, too, and talking about Teddy Long and saying that, how stupid he was, and that wasn't what he was told. And, you go tell Teddy, I told him I want a good competitive match out. We do want you to slide Marco. Do you have a problem with that? I said, no, absolutely not. Just how do you want it done? And he said, we were hoping, about 10, 12 minutes, and would you be so kind as to let him beat you with a heart punch? I said, sure, that's fine. If there's nothing else, I can do that, but it's got to be competitive. And so I split an idea by me where I make a heck of a comeback, and out of no place, he grabs it, hits me with the Teddy Long draws the referee. He gets the up somehow, hits me with a hard punch, and turns around 1, 2, 3. Jim Ross, I'm quoting verbatim now, Jim Ross tells me, tremendous. Go find Jody Hamilton. You'll begin to see by this story how this convoluted this company was being run.
Right.
People running in every 8 directions, all 8 directions with different things and different ideas on their head. So I go find Jody Hamilton, and I tell Jody Hamilton, who's writing up the finishes of the matches and putting them on the board, and I tell him what Jim Ross had told me. And now Jody and I had been pretty close friends, or I thought, and Jody wouldn't look me in the eye. I mean, it's really odd, something, right away I'm beginning to suspect that there's something going on here that more than meets the eye. I've been around the business long enough to know at that point that, when it smells like crap, it looks like crap, and especially tastes like crap, it's probably crap.
Right.
And, when Jody wouldn't look me in the eye, Jody said he cut me off mid-sentence. I was telling him what Jim Ross had just told me. He cuts me off mid-sentence. He goes, no. Shane, you're going to go to that ring tonight. You're going to put Mark Callis over in under 3 minutes in a squash match. Or you can walk the hell, or you can get your ass out of this building.
Wow.
I looked at him, I thought, you know what? Put it that way, made my decision really. I took the garbage can and I threw it at him. I said, I walked the hell out of this building. I turned around and I punched his board and I smashed the blackboard that he had written 3 hours of the matches on.
Wow.
So I walked out of the building and I went to the hotel to check, get my bag and go to the airport because I wasn't going home. I was going to Atlanta because I wanted to meet with Jim Herd. I wanted to tell Jim Herd exactly. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. I wanted to find out was this what the company wanted, or was this usurping the company's will? Because once they've got you on tape getting beaten 3 minutes, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then they can go back to the promoter, the bookers, can then go back to the boss, like Jim Herd, and say, well, we got that damn match out there, and even though it was wrong, it's out there. The fans think he's a loser now, so we can't push him. So I went back to Atlanta, stopped in Atlanta for the night. The next morning, I went to the building. And Jim Herb meets with me at 9 o'clock, and he starts, he doesn't let me talk. I get in there and he starts telling me, I heard what happened last night, and I know exactly what you're planning, and, we're not so stupid around here as you think we are, Shane, and, I had spoken to Patterson 2 or 3 times on the phone. He had called me, and, at the time, they were chugging along as the biggest company in the world, and I'm not going to tell the booker of the other company to not call me again. I was under contract, so I had no concern there. Well, he starts talking about what a dumbass I am for taking these phone calls, and, he knows what I'm thinking about going to WWF, and he's going to proceed to show me why it's a big mistake. So he shows me, he pulls out a piece of paper out of his desk, and he says, let me show you this. And as I reach for it, he pulls it away from my hand, and he goes, now, you're probably not going to be able to understand this being that you're a wrestler.
Wow.
Well, you sawed-off son of a bitch. And I grabbed the paper and I said, Jim, I've got 2 master's degrees. Well, that time master's, I had 1. I said, I've got a master's degree. I'll understand anything on this desk and probably interpret it back to you better than you understand it. So I look at the paper. Honest to God, what he showed me was a list of ratings. It was WWF's ratings, singularly, their rating alone, versus, at the time, there were still Portland and a bunch of other companies in 1990. This was 7 or 8 other companies around the country, no matter how podunk or small they were. Individual markets they were in, they took all those markets, those shows, those companies, combined them to come up with a singular number to, basically say, all 10 companies added up with WCW's numbers, and their rating was still lower than Vince's, but it was close. And I said to Jim, Jim, you're telling me I don't understand this stuff. I said, do you honestly believe what you just told me? Because what he was telling me was I was crazy to go to work for the largest wrestling company in the world because they were crushing us in the ratings. But if you combine our ratings with all these other companies out there that have nothing to do with us, have nothing to do with our bottom line, their profit potential has nothing to do with our profit potential, and they're still losing the number battle. Vince is still winning. You're going to tell me how I'm crazy to want to go to work for this guy. So when he told me that, I ripped the paper in half, and I remember distinctly thinking to myself, I am never again going to allow myself to work for people like this. I mean, this guy was a moron. He actually believed what he was telling me and saw no folly in it. And so for me, it was a very simple decision to leave at that point. You know, even though I was making decent money, I felt that at that point, if there was a good decision to be made, it's best to place my career in the hands of people like Pat Patterson, who were really rocking the wrestling world at that time with ratings and crisp ideas and good booking, as opposed to a guy who doesn't understand his own rating system. You know, it just really, to me, was a no-brainer.
Wow. Well, I can't tell you how much I'm enjoying this so far. The next question I have for you is, how did the WWF compare to WCW production-wise and such when you went there?
Like the NFL versus Little League football, or Little League, or like Pop Warner football. I mean, wow. It was just two completely different entities. In WCW, I mean, it would take me hours upon hours to tell you in all the tiny details, but you walk into a WWF production, whether it's a house show, a pay-per-view, or a television taping, and there are literally signs everywhere telling you where the catering is, telling you where the interview rooms are, telling you where Vince's office is, where the health office is, where the commission is, where the makeup girls are, where the ring is, where your dressing room is. I mean, you get that. It's pretty much you just go through the motions. They have the coffee's being made. The girls are back there to help you with your costumes and your makeup, and I mean, it's just a completely professionally run company. And whereas at WCW, you get there and you have to try to find. You walk around the building for 5 or 10 minutes to try to find the locker room. If you needed coffee, you had to send somebody out to buy it or try to see if the concession stand was open and stuff like that, because I mean, just little tiny, no-brainer stuff. I mean, let's face it, you're going to have to be there all day, and you got a lot of athletes that are, tired from traveling and wrestling the night before and training during the day. The coffee seems to me, I mean, every office in the country has a coffee part in it. But in WCW, just little things like that. And like I said, those just exemplify the larger product of the companies. I mean, Vince McMahon's business. Now, I'm not talking about his writing and the final product today. But production-wise, Vince McMahon is not just the best in wrestling. Vince McMahon's production capacity is on par with anything Disney can do. Spielberg's company, what's his company? Something Light, and the special effects company that he owns. Vince McMahon can do anything any of those other production companies can do on the face of the planet. That's what makes his production top-notch in the world. Vince has always reinvested money in coming up with the best technologies for the best production, so the show looks as good as it possibly can look. Unfortunately, even with the best smoke and mirrors, you can't make that product they have right now look good. So, but that's a different story.
Wow. Why was your stay in the WWF so short?
Well, I was there for, I can't remember exactly, I want to say it was like 6 or 8 months. And to be honest with you, I had a very productive stay, a very good stay. It was by far away my most positive WWF experience of my career. But what happened was, in early 1991, about March of 91, my dad, my dad was 48 whenever I was born, so I was always, growing up had these concerns about me getting a phone call at school that my dad had died or whatever, because whenever I was in high school, my dad was in his 60s. And I had friends that their dad died in their 40s and stuff. I'm sure friends of yours that had their parents die at very young ages. So for me, it was, it was really, a nerve-wracking thing. And, my dad became very ill in 91 and come down with latter-stage emphysema, tough old World War II vet. The doctor said he must have been having symptoms for a year or better and just chose to ignore them. The shortness of breath and the palpitations, and he just sucked it up like those World War II vets did. That whole generation of people from the Depression of World War II, they weren't a bunch of whiners and complainers. They just lived life, and no matter how hard it was, they went through and did what they had to do. So I get the phone call on the road that my dad, basically had 3 to 5 days to live.
Wow.
So I rushed home, and Vince was very gracious at the time. I've got my differences with Vince today, but at that time, Vince was very gracious. He had another contract, and I went to explain to him, and of course I was very emotional because of my dad. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, listen, Shane, family comes first. This business is bullshit. It's secondary to anything that has to do with family. You go home, spend time with your dad, you do whatever you have to do, and if you ever want to come back, the door's always open. And that was it. I was released from my contract. I went home, and fortunately for me at the time, my dad, in typical, fashion for that generation, just sucked it up and refused. At first they said 3 to 5 days, and well, a week later they told us it might be a couple of weeks, but he was definitely going to die. And then maybe it was a month or two, and finally after 27 days, the doctors came in and said, well, we can't explain it. It's a miracle, but your dad's going to go home, and he had to make some living adjustments, like he was going to have oxygen and stuff for the better part of the day, and different medicines, and had to exercise and stuff, but, he was still alive, and that was the most important thing, and because he was on oxygen, you can't leave people with oxygen alone because they sometimes become forgetful or whatever, and if you would leave the gas stove on, for instance, when his oxygen was running or get too close, it could blow the house up.
Wow.
So he couldn't live alone, so that was the reason I left the road and, went back to spend it with him, but it had actually nothing to do with the business. It was, purely family.
When you made your return to WCW, of course, team with Ricky the Dragon Stevo for quite some time. What are your impressions and memories of Ricky?
Well, first of all, Ricky was a tremendous guy. Top-notch class. I mean, in this business, it's rare to find. He's just a classy guy that also happens to be probably the greatest babyface in the history of our business. And so it's a heck of a combination we put together. When they put me with Steamboat, he could have very easily said no to them. And he probably had enough clout to be able to do it without heat. But Ricky was very gracious. Ricky and I, spoke often before we were putting that tag team together. And I think he saw in me a little bit of himself in one sense that, I was going to bust my ass and work as hard as he did, and he didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But he saw in me the same kind of ambition, and I think that interested him. At a time when he was probably getting a little stale in the ring and, needed something to push him as well. He saw this young kid coming up, that was full of piss and vinegar and ready to learn. And I think he used it to his impetus. He would take me, and not just me, but, Austin and Pillman were equally as green as I was at the time. And Steamboat would take the three of us out there by the nose and lead us to great matches, and, taught us a hell of a lot in the process. So, a lot of the success that I've had later in my career as, the franchise and, the different things that I've done with my career since then, I directly credit back to Ricky Steamboat. He taught me how to be a main eventer. He taught me how to go from being that guy that gets beat up in the corner to the guy that does the beating up, and so, again, as far as gratefulness goes, and gratitude, I'll always be grateful to Ricky Steamboat and what he taught me and took the time to teach me with.
One of the tag teams you guys feuded with was the Hollywood Blondes, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin. Did you ever think that Steve Austin would catch on as big as he did?
I always knew Steve had the potential to. I mean, I don't think anybody can project the kind of phenomenon that Steve Austin became later. But yeah, Steve was always a very good in-ring performer, very solid. Always left his ass in the ring. He never left anything in the dressing room, if you know what I mean. He went to the ring every night and busted his ass as hard as he could. I think part of the reason for his big success was he had that little stint in ECW, and at a time when all the planets and stars wanted just right. When he went to WWF, he had just been through ECW and had learned the parameters of that edgy, in-your-face product at a time that Vince was just getting ready to go to that. So, the first, however long it was when they had him in there with DiBiase doing that, the face belt thing and stuff.
The ringmaster, yeah.
Yeah, the ringmaster. That was just so far not him. But when they brought him in there and they put the belt on him and doing those types of things, that was, just finally all the pieces coming together for him. His character, I think, is an amalgamation of different characters that he had seen in ECW. There's a bit of the Sandman with the beer drinking and the common guy aspect, driving the pickup truck, wearing the hooded sweatshirt. He appeals to the average pro wrestler because, like Sandman, he seems to be one of them. There's a lot of Taz in there, the attitude, the middle finger, that sort of thing. There's a lot of franchise in that character. I think he just took the best of the parts of the characters that were in ECW and mixed them together with his considerable in-ring talent, and it worked for him.
And of course, do you have any memories of Brian Pillman?
Oh yeah, Brian is, Brian and I sort of grew up in the business together. We worked a lot with each other or against each other. One story that stands out in my mind when people bring up Brian's name is, Brian was one of those guys that you could love to death, and 10 seconds later want to beat him up. It's just that kind of dichotomy in him. But we were working the angle of the loose cannon. Who's the bigger loose cannon in ECW, me or Brian Pillman? And we had the angle going on the ringside where his manager, his publicist guy was outside, I forget the guy's name offhand, but he was sitting outside the ring with Pillman. And Pillman, I go to the ring to do a match, and he spit on me or did something and draws my attention back. Well, I grab a chair, and I go to smack him with a chair, and unbeknownst to me and totally unrehearsed, he grabs this 8, 9, 10-month-old baby out of a woman's arms next to him and holds the baby up between him and the chair.
Oh, my.
That I'm in mid-swing with at this point. And, I remember saying at the time, if you can go back and watch the tape of me doing it, you can see me, pulling my wrist back and, with everything in me trying to stop that chair from coming any farther forward, because had it been another inch and a half, 2 inches, I probably would have smacked the baby. And, and I was so pissed off after being in the back. I was cussing and spitting and everything else. I was so angry. And Pillman started laughing, which pissed me off even more. And he said one thing to me. He said, it worked, didn't it? Because the crowd was insane pissed off. And it did work. But I was pissed off because they almost had me hitting the baby with a chair, But that was Brian. Brian, to him, the bottom line was what mattered, nothing in between.
Wow. Okay, now this is a question that I have never understood. Maybe you can shed some light on it. At the end of your stint with Ricky Steamboat, you guys wrestled under masks for a short stint. What was that all about?
Typical WCW BS. I mean, here was the thing. If you're a shyster and a liar and a backstabber, you're going to lie and you're going to shyster and you're going to backstab everybody as soon as you meet them, because if you live your life like that, you figure everybody's like that, and you better get them before they get you. It's called paranoia. And in wrestling, there's an abundance of it, because there's so much other paranoia in the dressing room that literally it's 25 guys sitting in the dressing room trying to stab the other 25 guys in the back, and there's other 25 guys trying to stab the first 25 guys in the back before they get them. It's the craziest, most emotionally exhausting part of wrestling that you can ever believe. I mean, when you go home after a long tour, what is beating you down and worn you out is not the physical side of our business. It's that crap that goes on in the dressing room with everybody lying and swerving and smiling to your face when the other trying to stick a knife in your back. And you just, the one word that comes to mind is smarmy. You feel like a dirty prostitute after a tour, because you've gone out there and you've been false to other people because they're being false to you. And but to answer your question, by giving that statement, before I answer the question, with that mindset of that paranoia that's in the dressing room, WCW, at the time I had blown my knee out, and this is right around the same time it was my shoulder. My knee was the other incident. I had blown my shoulder out and had to have surgery on it. In '93 was when I had my first surgery on my shoulder, and I'd blown it out in the match. I forget the name of the town. I've got it written down someplace. But I was working the match for them and blew my shoulder out, and had to have more than just a little scope. They had to open me up and go and do some detach some muscles and snap off some bone and reattach the muscles and regenerate the joint. It was pretty involved surgery for a person who'd never had a tooth pulled at that time. And so I was supposed to take whatever the time was off, and they wanted me back in the ring immediately to draw the belts to Brian and Steve, because they felt that with me being hurt that I must be, swerving them somehow. And I said to them, look, if you want the belts drawn to Brian and Steve, I'll do it the first day I'm back. Just let me get well again. I don't want to go in that ring and tear myself up further and instigate a whole lot more injuries. And they were so adamant about getting those belts off us because they thought I was going to screw them, I guess. I mean, nobody's ever told me this. The only thing that makes sense to me was that they wanted those belts off of us so fast and so quickly before we had a chance to to screw them, which, first of all, Steamboat's too much of a gentleman to ever do that. And him being basically my boss, he wouldn't have allowed me to do it. So, and I certainly wouldn't have done it without his blessing or consent. So, I mean, the whole thing was crazy paranoia on their part. But what they did was, you know, they took, there were two different guys that played the Dos Hombres, was the name of the tag team.
Mm-hmm.
Steamboat was always the one guy. The other guy was played by two different people, Brad Armstrong and Tom Zank. Neither of which are built like me. They both have much smaller waistlines. Brad is a lot shorter. Tom is a little bit taller. Tom has more of that classic bodybuilder look, lean, muscled up look, whereas I have more of the classic wrestler look, you know, thicker torso, you know, bicep. I mean, everybody on the planet that was watching that knew that it wasn't me. And, you know, I think they just did themselves more damage, and they demeaned their own title when they did that, and they dropped the belt just for the sake of getting the belt off of one tag team. You know, they put it on another tag team that, quite frankly, didn't deserve it at the time. They were still learning on being the blondes and stuff, and it didn't help them. They were thrust into the spotlight before they had really learned how to turn it on. Now, they later did a great job. It took them about a month to get their chemistry down and stuff, but once they got it, they were great.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's just another anecdote as to why WCW eventually failed. Without the big money that they had behind them in the form of, you know, Time Warner, AOL, they would have never lasted as long as they did.
Why did you leave WCW the second time round?
To be quite honest with you, I was just fed up with the business. That whole incident with the belt change and the Dos Hombres, it was meant to embarrass me more than anything. And I had done absolutely nothing to the company except bust my ass at a bargain-based price. I was making $300 a night, whereas Pillman and Austin were both making, I think, in the 200s. Steamboat was making in the 300 or 400s, which they all deserved. Don't get me wrong, they all deserved that. But I was 25% of that match as well. And my contract at the time that I first went there, because I had no leverage, I had left to go home and teach school and be with my dad. So I went back on the road. I had no leverage, so I accepted the $300 a night guarantee with the understanding that I had the opportunity to contribute. And if I proved that I could contribute, my contract would be renegotiated at any time. And so, you know, when I sought to renegotiate my contract, at the end of each 90 days clause, the first time Bill Watts told me that that money was too tight, you know, please give him another 3 months, which I did. At the end of the second 3 months, he had been fired. It was in the process of being fired. So that got pushed off another 3 months. At the end of the third 3 months, and the ninth month in, after I'd made a considerable, I mean, our ratings, our quarter hours were consistently the highest rated quarter hours on the show. Me and Ricky were consistently being voted as the top tag team. You know, we were selling a ton of merchandise. I mean, all the indices were in our favor. And they, at the end of that third period, Ole Anderson actually had the guts to tell me that I wasn't worthy of a pay raise, because when he was my age, he made the same amount of money that I made, and he lived fine on it. And I said to him, for God's sakes, you idiot, when you were my age, a hotel room was $10 a night, a steak dinner was $2.95, the rental car was $15 a day. That stuff's all 5-10 times that now. So you made the same money as me. Guess what? You were making 10 times the money I was making back then. And, you know, that's when it basically came out of me to be a decision. You know, keep working with this company where they're just, you know, throwing money on every place else, but don't want to give somebody that's contributing to the company a fair raise. And it became just, and then they did the thing with the Dos Hombres, which was just specifically meant to belittle and embarrass my character and me. I decided at that point I'd had enough of wrestling. It was time to move on, and so I did. And I went home and decided that I would finish up with the wrestling business and be done with it. And a couple months later, I started getting phone calls from Eddie Gilbert. You know, they were starting this new company in Philadelphia, or he was running this company in Philadelphia called ECW, and he wanted me to come in, and I wasn't being coy, and I wasn't being an ass. I just wanted nothing to do with the wrestling business. I was so fed up with it at that point. And I think he took it like me, holding out for more money and stuff. So he would call me back and, you know, sweeten the kitty, you know, with more money. And, you know, then it was this, and then it was that. And I kept telling him, no. This is going, you know, 6-7 phone calls. And finally, the last thing he says to me was, if you come, we'll will position your character as the lead heel in the company. Well, that was one of the things I always wanted to do, is I wanted to make sure I'd learned how to be a heel before I left the business. I always wanted to try all the different aspects of being in the ring. So that, and then he also agreed to let me be on the booking committee to learn that side of it. And that was pretty much what convinced me to go to ECW. That's what brought me out of retirement, because I made the statement at the time that I was retired from wrestling. I'd had it. I was fed up. And that was what eventually pulled me back in, was the opportunity to play the heel and to be involved in the booking so I could see how that was done and learn. And the rest, they say, is history.
I don't know if there's anything to go on here, but the initial ECW title tournament was won by Tito Santana. And maybe I missed something, but the next week you seem to be the champion. Is there anything behind the scenes that you know of that resulted in that change?
You know, I have no idea about that, except to say that when I got to TV the one week, they had said that there was this elusive tournament held in Florida or someplace where I beat Tito, I guess. And, of course, it never happened. And so I don't know if there was something that had gone on business-wise, or if they just chose that maybe Tito at the time was too expensive. I don't know. But you'd have to ask Todd Gordon or Paul Heyman, or, now you can't ask Eddie Gilbert, obviously, but one of those would be the only two men that I would know that would be in the know on that.
You threw down the NWA World Heavyweight title. First of all, how much of that was, this sounds like a stupid question, but it's honestly something that's been on my mind since I saw it. How much of that was planned?
Well, the concept itself was planned, and there were only three people that were privy to it, me, Todd Gordon, and Paul Heyman. Paul had come to me, and about 2 weeks before, said he had an idea, ran the idea by me, and he told me at the time, don't make up your decision, don't say yes or no, think about it. And, and he went a step further. He said, here's some of the reasons what I was fans of, heroes of mine would be, very pissed off at me for doing it. I would be pegged as being a backstabber and stuff like that if I did it. And, so I was really hesitant to do it. And the thing that finally convinced me to do it was whenever Dennis Corluso, who I had never seen, had never wrestled for, never met the guy as far as I knew. He had been going out about and telling people that they shouldn't book me for independent shows because I would no-show and bad risk. Well, to my knowledge, I never no-showed anybody. On the instance that I guess he was using that Mike Today later told me about was there was a guy in Michigan that had booked me, and we'd come to agreement on price and travel and accommodations. And as the show grew closer, this guy kept calling me up and saying, well, Shane, ticket sales aren't going well. Can I pay half the money? And when I balked at that and told him no, okay, that was fine. Then a couple days later, he called me back and say, could he have me stay at somebody's house instead of a hotel room? And he kept trying to back out of the agreement on certain parts of it. And the long and short of it was, I finally said to him, look, no way. If you can't afford to pay me, if you can't afford to go the way you said it, then we need to sever this relationship right now, and don't book me anymore, don't announce me anymore for the show. Well, when I threatened him with that, he said, no, everything was fine. And then he called me at the last minute and said that if plane tickets were too expensive, could I drive up? Well, I couldn't drive up because I was teaching school at the time, and I couldn't make the Friday night show in time if I drove. So I told him, I said, you know what? I was getting too nervous then. There was too many, I had visions of getting up there and getting screwed out of the money and stuff. So I told him, look, take my name off of it. I'm not there. I'm not coming. So I sent him back his down payment and everything. And Corluso was citing that as being the reason why people shouldn't book me. And it really pissed me off. So here was a chance for me to receive back somebody that was trying to screw my ability to make money. And we got to the building that day, and I still hadn't decided whether I was going to do it or not. And then Dennis kept coming up to me and asking me my long-lost friend. 2 weeks before on the radio, he's burying me and my ability to make a living in this business. Now he's stuck to my side like a dingleberry. He's playing my long-lost buddy, and hey, man, and he kept wanting me to sign this contract, which, of course, I couldn't sign. And, so that was when I decided, when I just saw how two-faced he was being. And after talking so bad about me on the phone or on the radio 2 weeks before that, and suddenly, I'm his long lost buddy. I'm going to be his champion and all that kind of stuff. You know, so this is a chance for me to really, for the first time, put in practice my dad's philosophy of, you know, do right by the people and do unto them as they do to you, but also don't be afraid to spread your wings and try to fly. In other words, try to reach for the stars, be the best that you can be, never settle for second best. And this was the opportunity for me, the first time as a man in my life, to put into practice. And you know, went out and did it. Of course, you know, the outcome of it was now, I believe, a historic part of wrestling heritage.
Mm. Mm.
Do you feel that maybe now you're in TNA, that the NWA holds any grudge maybe on you for doing that?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a big part of that. You know, to me, the logical thing when they brought me in would have been for me to shoot right to the title, and you know, go off the old adage that nobody ever beat me, so you know, I should still be the champion. But you know, there's also a luxury to not being involved in those matches. The luxury of no pressure. You know, to have to go out and live up and perform to a certain level or whatever. That's left to somebody else. That particular priority on the show is somebody else's baby to deal with. And, you know, so for me it's nice because I don't have to deal with all that.
All right. From this point on, about 1995, I would say, 1994, 1995, you went to the WWF, and they gave you the character of Dean Douglas. What is your opinion of that character?
Everything negative. My opinion on the character initially was that the character had great potential. The whole purpose when they first brought me up there, the whole reason for the character was Vince was beginning to notice bad trends amongst his wrestlers, i.e., not grapevine in the leg when they would go for a cover, except when it was the actual pin. You know, taking bumps when things, like when a drop kick would miss by a foot and a half, they'd still take a bump. You know, the guys walking to the ring and, you know, with their shoulders slouched, and they're not walking to the ring like a confident champion. And all the character was meant to do was meant to be a way for us to tongue in cheek, point out the wrestler's flaws. And by doing that, hopefully improve their product and hopefully improve their game. Well, of course, the WWF superstars that know everything and, you know, can't be taught anything didn't take any very kindly to that. Here comes an outsider telling them what they're doing wrong in their matches and stuff, and instead of taking it constructively like they should have taken it, they took it like it was disrespectful and it was making fun of them and stuff like that. So, you know, it was doomed to fail and not work. But if you go back and you look now at the, you know, at what they're doing in the ring now there, it's the same exact stuff. I mean, they had hired at one point, I'm trying to get his name right again, but he was tag team partners with Pat Patterson in California and San Francisco.
I know who you're talking about. I just can't.
My tongue. Great wrestler. He just died recently in the last couple of years.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
But they brought him in for the exact same purpose, to basically point out the flaws in the guy's game and all that sort of thing. And now you're beginning to see the flip side of it, where a lot of the guys don't have that seasoning, and the product is really beginning to suffer because of it. So, you know, it's become very formulaic and stuff, and they backed off it. They didn't want to, you know, they didn't want to dress room full of guys that were mad because they were being told that they didn't grapevine the leg. But, you know, you can go back at any time and prove me wrong and see if I'm right or wrong. Watch the reaction of the crowd when people don't know how to do a false finish properly, and they don't get any pop of it because at 1.5 they're already moving the leg to kick out instead of being motionless until 2.5.
Right.
Just things like that, minor points, but things that we learned as kids in this business are now being overlooked, and quote-unquote seasoned veterans are lacking in that knowledge because they've never been taught. You know, so it you know, but I think the potential that the Dean Douglas character has great potential to help and to also draw heat. You know, there was something that went on there that I hadn't seen a WWF show before or since. There was one that I did with that fellow Babyface is Lang, and I think it was in Michigan somewhere. Lansing, Michigan, I believe. And I picked Sean and gave him the drop suplex on the stairs, and all of the Babyfaces were off Lang. When I did get to him, put the boots to him, he was laying in the front row. He was going to jump the ring and come after me. You know, now, that's the kind of stuff that you haven't seen in WWF in God knows how long. That kind of white heat where the fans would actually get on the verge of rioting. But it was my contention that because that's what is missing, that's what they need. They need to have somebody back then out pointing out those weaknesses to each other.
And we'll be back with more of the franchise Shane Douglas on what now must be considered the best online radio show going today, The Interactive Interview.
The excitement of competition.
Don't ever try to one-up the Stinger.
And the will to win.
I will not be ignored.
TNA, total non-stop action wrestling. The most exciting, high-flying, death-defying wrestling in the world. TNA Wrestling on pay-per-view.
TNA, are you ready to feel the power of Hulkamania?
Like what you're hearing so far. You've not heard anything yet. Coming soon to the interactive interview, two legends of the ring. The Rocker, Marty Jannetty, and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. The interactive interview, finally, a wrestling audio show for the fans.
Welcome back to more of the Shane Douglas interview on the interactiveinterview.com. We join Shane now as he's working out in his gym from home. We apologize for the audio quality. It's not our fault, but Shane was working out. Anyway, if you listen closely, you can hear clearly enough. So enjoy the remainder of the Shane Douglas interview on the interactive interview. One of the guys you worked with regularly in the WWF was Scott Hall, a.k.a. Razor Ramon. What is your memories of working with Scott?
His agenda was to keep the Intercontinental tight. Friends between him and Hunter and Sean Waltman and Shawn Michaels and the rest of them. And that's ultimately fine. But to me, it smacked in the face of the company. You know, to me, Vince's opinion should have been more pissed off than I was because it was Vince's company. He was the one that laid money out in the idea of the Dean character and promulgated a hell of a lot of television for that character. And let's just put it this way, in business the way it's set up today, it takes two to tango in that ring. If both of you aren't pushing or pulling in the same direction, then you're in for a hell of a crappy match out there. And let's just say that he was constantly pushing whenever I was pulling and vice versa. And it culminated, it came to a head in Switzerland, the last day of a 2-week tour of Germany and Switzerland, where we had done the same match night after night after night, which is what he likes to do, which is, I guess, the WWE formula. It drives me insane. I want to do something different. It's like keep it creative, keep it fun, keep it interesting to the fans. Because, for instance, what sells for tonight may not sell in Cleveland tomorrow night, and so on.
Right.
So I've always believed in having been taught by guys like Ricky Steamboat and Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton and Bruno Sammartino and a list of scores of others that have always taught me. The old school belief is to change it up each night, keep it creative, keeps it fun for you as well. And at the end of this 2-week tour, where I was just bored out of my skull from the same stupid, dumb match, which really made no sense the way the match was set up and the segue of the spots and so on, to where he was, he used to do the thing with his character where he'd come out, get in your face, you get in his face and you do the finger shake thing, he's scared of you, which is condescending when you put the heel down like that. It's insane with the heel puts the baby down like that. It's off saying, basically, the crowd, this guy's a piece of shit. So I'm not concerned of him. And so the match starts off storyline-wise, psychology-wise, 6 feet on the ground. Well, the Dean character, if you recall, was supposed to be the smartest man in the world, 7 PhDs, the smartest guy in every field. So I was told the smartest guy in the world would be smarter than Razor Ramon, since he had done it in every single match that he'd ever done in WWF as Razor Ramon. Would be reaching for the toothpick next to throw into your face. He did it on every match, on every television, on every pay-per-view, and every house show, to every wrestler he ever wrestled. So my thinking would be the Dean would be pretty smart. He's the smartest guy in the world. We know that was coming, and he beat him to the punch. So on the last night of that 2-week tour, I did that. As he reached back with the toothpick and threw in my face, I smacked him upside his face. It's not working smack, pretty solid to get his attention, and I began to feed him because I figured he's going to come firing back. And instead, this babyface who has always told me he's a great worker gets down on his hands and knees and starts to fumble around looking for the toothpick that he dropped. and that was a lost cause. And, so that's just one anecdote as to why. And I say that in a very sarcastic tone because I've seen Scott Hall go when he wants to go. I know Scott Hall can go in the ring when he wants to go. So if the two of us can't get in the ring, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm far from the greatest worker in the business, but I've had some pretty good matches in my career, and I think I've made a name for myself in 20-some years. I'm very capable in the ring. So if a great wrestler like Scott Hall, and I'm sure he'll tell you he's a great wrestler, and I agree to that to some extent, if a great wrestler like Scott Hall and a proven commander like Shane Douglas cannot get in the ring and have a very strong match, then the problem lies somewhere, and other than the ability of the two combatants, must lie someplace in agenda. And if the match didn't come off well, it certainly, I can tell you, wasn't for lack of me trying, because I don't know how to do anything else but go out there. I hear these guys going, let's go out there and take it easy tonight. And I've never understood that, because I don't know how to go out there and take it easy. When you get running into a spot or something in your head, I can't selectively go through and say, well, this spot, okay, we'll do these 10 moves. No, that's a bit too hard, so let's call off that one and do something else. I can't do that. So, that is what it is. I didn't have a very good time working there in that capacity with him or anybody else up there at that time, for that matter.
You just mentioned the Intercontinental title, and you were awarded the title by Shawn Michaels, who handed it to you. I've heard you speak very candidly, actually, in a promo that I actually put at the beginning of the show when you listen to it. You spoke very candidly about not enjoying that. Could you explain exactly what was going through backstage that made that occur?
Well, it's common knowledge, and I've spoken about it so many times, but in a nutshell, the company had wanted us to work a match where I would, for the Intercontinental belt, defeat Shawn Michaels, and then come time for WrestleMania, he would have, captured the world title, and just like as Rick Rude and Ultimate Warrior had done before, come WrestleMania, the fans would then think, oh man, Shane got this, Dean is going to teach him another lesson. And, of course, chin music, 1, 2, 3, Shawn Michaels over would be the outcome. It's a great idea, a great build-up. And Shawn is perhaps the greatest worker in the history of the business as far as in-ring stuff goes. My differences with him aside, he's extremely capable in the ring. So applying the same theorem that I did a minute ago with Scott Hall, if the two of us couldn't get in the ring and have a good match, it's got to be for lack of one of us or both of us not trying. And, and I'm surprised that Vince couldn't see that. I mean, Vince has grown up around this business a lot more than I have. So, again, I think that Vince should be angry that the match didn't get over, wouldn't get over, and his anger should be placed at somebody else other than me, I think, because I wasn't going there and, forfeiting titles and things of that nature. The reason he forfeited the title in a nutshell was when he found out that the company wanted to do the favor for the build-up to the world title match. He decided to start running his mouth for a customer. Shawn likes to talk. Shawn likes to run his mouth a bit. He can talk a big game, but he can't walk the big walk, so to speak. And he told a lot of people in the dressing room when we were on a tour of Germany that he was going to embarrass him on national television. To which I responded to the same people that told me what he had said, that if he tries, I'll stretch him. I was trained by Dominic Vinci, who's a 1956 silver medalist. I'm not saying get in there and shoot with Kurt Angle and do very well, but I could certainly do with Shawn Michaels. But that's what we're out there for. We're out there to draw money. We're out there to fight each other, beat each other, or try to embarrass each other. We're out there to try to entertain the fans, or should be, to give them their money's worth. And again, if I were Vince McMahon, I'd be very upset in hearing this kind of discussion in the back. But I'm not going to allow him to go on and make statements like that and go on checks. I try to use me for the butt of his jokes. I don't do that to people, and I'd be damned if I allow somebody to do it to me. And when I heard it, I told Baby Boy Smith and most people that have tried, but I was stretching on national television. And, when you're in the ring, there's not a whole lot that anybody can do. It's pretty much just wait for the end of the match. And at that point, I was called and told that Shawn Michaels had a relapse of this concussion. And again, having been to medical school, I know a little bit about this subject. So I asked people, hit in the head again, and they said no. So I asked, well, how did he have a relapse of a concussion? Because it's pretty much the only way you can relapse a concussion is to get hit in the head again. And he hadn't been working, so that couldn't have been the deal. And, later came out that, he just didn't want to work with me because he wanted to be able to stay with his boys, so to speak. And it sort of worked out that way. I went to the Marine, got a hand the belt. 15 minutes later, I'm being pinned as a remote. And, it's just comical to me. It's just comical the whole way the thing goes down. He gets like to say he has control of his company, he runs it his way. I say hogwash to that. The inmates run the asylum up there. It's a proven fact.
All right, so why did you leave the WWF, though?
I left the WWF because after being there after 2 weeks, I was doing a series of vignettes one day at the studio, and Vince had come to me, first of all, to secure the deal, get me up there. I become a pretty hot commodity with ECW. There was a lot of banter going on, there was a lot of buzz about the franchise character, and to be quite honest, I was being a pain in their butt because I was skewing their champions and tearing up their product. And their fans were chanting ECW, not our fans chanting WWF. I think, in hindsight, Vince saw it as an opportunity to get the mouthpiece of that company away from there and in his back pocket, so to speak, so he could control the flow of those scathing promos that were being done. And, but when he got me up there, I don't think that Vince got me up there in hopes of just sitting on the sidelines and burying me. I think Vince truly wanted to get the character over. And put a lot of time and effort into that, except for the agenda of the guys that we just talked about. But whenever I got up there by the second week, he had said to me in our meetings prior to me signing that if there was ever anything that I wasn't happy with, and he wrote down his whole number of piece of paper, he said, if there's ever anything you're unhappy with, I want you to call me immediately. I don't care if it's the middle of the night, Shane. You can call me at home, and we'll rectify it right then. So, there were several things that were starting to go on, the outfit, which I thought was just ridiculous for a heel. And it came time for those vignettes, the promos, and Vince was adamant about me doing these vignettes in that monotone, monotonous, boring teacher-style promo. And, that felt good and fine. Vince had confided me, but the reason he did that was he once had a teacher that did that, and it drove him nuts. That's what the difference between that and this is. When you were in that guy's classroom, you couldn't get up and change the channel.
Right.
Yeah. And the one thing I didn't want to do is become a boring character on TV, because if you're boring, those fans, I know I'm one of them. I'm a channel surfer. So I didn't want to become the butt of channel surfing. Give the fans a reason to turn over to WCW or to whomever at that point. And so I said that to Vince. He said, well, go ahead and do it your way. Let me see how you do it. So I did the promo again. Same exact wording, same verbiage, same grade, same criticisms, everything, because I did his version. But the one that I did second, I did with the franchise voice. Right. The inflection, the style, everything about it was a franchise promo, pounding my fist on the podium, very passionate. And I think I do know something about promos, and this clearly was a much better promo than the first one. Right as I finished up, before he had a chance to tell me which one he liked, he got called out of the room by J.J. Dillon for a phone call. So as he was out of the room, I asked everybody in that room. There were probably 10 or 15 people minimum in the room at that time. There were makeup girls and lighting guys and camera guys, sound guys, Michael Hayes, who was a great promo himself, Stan Lane, Jim Ross. I mean, there were a plethora of people in this room. And so I went around and told them, and I asked every person in that room which one they liked better. 100%, not 99.9 or less, 100% of the people, every single person in that room said that my way was much better. It was compelling and held their interest. They were interested to listen. So when Vince came back in, I was excited because I thought we're getting somewhere. Vince came in, and I asked him what he thought. He looked around the room for a second, had their glass down the tip of his nose, and he said, I like my way better. And he looked around the room and said, what does everybody think? And every single person that had just told me they liked my way better agreed totally with Vince. And the danger to that was, here I am on a ship called the WWE Titan Sports with a crew that's afraid to tell the captain there's an iceberg dead ahead because they're afraid to piss him off. And when I realized that, it was like a hammer hitting me over the head. Going, what in the hell have you done, you dumbass? To left that hot company called ECW to come up here. Again, when the crew's afraid to tell the captain yes or no. And it was at that point that I realized I wanted out. But it wasn't that simple. I was under a pretty ironclad contract for 2 or 3 years, I think it was. And luckily for me, my contract, my lawyer had negotiated a clause into the contract. They actually have a clause in their contract that says you can't sue them even in cases of negligence by them, which is absurd. I'm really
wow.
And luckily my lawyer saw that, spotted it, and raised the issue that we couldn't sign it that way, and so they allowed us to change it. And we changed it to read that I couldn't sue them except in cases of negligence by them. And luckily for me, or unluckily, whichever way you look at it, I came out with a broken back on it, but it was also the reason I was able to get out of that contract was that we were in Richmond, Virginia, Thanksgiving week, back in, I guess it would have been 95. And Davey Boy Smith was in the ring working with somebody right before they went live on Raw. And Davey Boy used to stomp both his feet. And when he stomped his feet the last time on a move, the ring collapsed. And about 30 people converged on the ring. I mean, we have to go live in a few minutes. 35 people converged on the ring. Started tearing the ring down, throwing pieces all over the place. When they put it back together, they put it back together so tightly that there was no spring in the floor. And the ring ropes basically felt like steel beams instead of cables.
Wow.
And Razor, I used to do a spot. I was working on Razor. Now this is after I'd already tendered my I'd asked Vince about getting out of my contract because at one point I had called home. My wife was concerned because we didn't have enough money to make our mortgage payment, which was $496 a month. And I'm out there working 28 days out of the month. So I went to Vince and I found that my wife basically told me about pay stubs that we had gotten. That I had been paid about $6,700 over 4 months. And so when I found that out, I went to Vince, armed with the knowledge that Dustin Rhodes, in a similar situation, had gone to Vince, and Vince offered an advance on his future salary. That was all I was looking for. That's all I could hope for. Just something I could make my mortgage payment with. And when I went to Vince, I told him my predicament, left the mortgage and the money and everything. I should also preface this whole thing by telling you that before I signed, my wife and him had a brief discussion in his office where she basically asked him what he could possibly offer me to walk away from ECW and teaching and everything else, where I was home 5 days a week and making damn good money. And Vince told my wife, he leaned across the table, stroked her hand, and he said, "Carter, you have my word as a gentleman. I'm going to make your husband a very wealthy man." To which point I pressed him and I asked him, Vince, I'm sure you and I have different definitions for the term wealthy. What are we talking about? Now, this is before the guaranteed contract. This was before WCW hit hard, and I understood that. And Vince mentioned that. He said, we're not guaranteeing you anything, but it's not uncommon for a person to be in the spot that we're putting you in as our top heel to make somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 a year.
Wow.
And so here I am in this contract for 4.5 months in, and I've made about $7,000 for 4 months of busting my ass.
Wow.
And so when I went to Vince and I asked him about it, he basically said, "Just hang in there, it'll get better." And I said, "Vince, I can't tell the bank to hang in there. They need a mortgage payment. I live in a small town.
Right.
Kind of town, if I don't make my mortgage payment, the rumors going to circulate that I'm doing drugs or cheating on my wife or something." And I explained to Vince how problematic that could be for me. And let's face it, I don't think it's all asking for much to make a $500 a month mortgage payment when I'm a WWF superstar. That's not asking for much when you're working your ass off. And, after about an hour's discussion, he basically said to me again, "Just hang in there, and I promise you'll get better." I said, "Well, if you have nothing else to say," and he said, "No, that's fine. I got my notice and my 2 week notice." He looked at me, I had 3 eyeballs. I possibly want to leave the World Wrestling Federation. And, it's fine to have pride in your own company and stuff. That's cool. I mean, we had an ECW. But when you're asking people to blindly follow a company when they can't pay their bills, that's, to me, that's called fanaticism. Jim Jones had the Kool-Aid that was poisoned. That same kind of logic. And, so I basically told him that I had to quit. At which point he asked me to work out a notice. And I told him I'd work out 2 weeks, standard notice. He asked me if I'd work out like a 4-month notice because he had over $1 million wrapped up in the Dean character. And I scoffed at him. I said, well, you certainly don't have a wrapped up in pay. I ended up working like a 1-month notice for him. But he started dragging his feet about when he was going to let me go, or if he was even going to let me go. At which point, this happened. The ring was breaking my back, working in that trumped-up ring. And, he said right before that, he was like, well, we'll let you go when we can. He started telling me, he never told me he wasn't going to let me go, but he started alluding to the fact that he may not. So whenever I got hurt and we had my clause in the contract, it was basically my ticket out of there. I could sue him if I wanted to. I'm not that kind of a person. I simply work out so I can make a living somewhere else. I don't want to fuck them. I don't have any care to screw anybody or get revenge on somebody. I simply want out so I can make a living and pay for my family's living lifestyle, which is pretty basic. We live in a $65,000 house. We don't live the WWF superstar lifestyle. So that was the reason I left.
Hey, you returned to ECW and made some noise quite quickly with the Queen of Extreme, Francine, as your valet. But what are your impressions of Francine today?
Today, a gold digger. Somebody that shows no thanks for what she was taught and what she was given. To me, I'm still extremely thankful for people like Ricky Steamboat and Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton and guys like that have taken me and taught me, because I realized what a gift that is in this business. I came up in a generation where Ric Flair and his generation were very tight with that information, didn't throw it around too much. In fact, they wielded it much as a weapon in order to keep them, as Father Time made them a step slower, a little bit weaker. Ric Flair and his kind used that knowledge of the business as a weapon to keep themselves in step with the younger talent, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Basically to keep us down. And I don't just say me, but me and Brian Pillman and Steve Austin and Johnny Ace and Tom Zank and plethora of Brad Armstrong, Tim Horn, just a quandary of young talent that was very capable, but didn't know what Ric Flair knew, and people like him. So, with all that in mind, I took Francine whenever Paul asked me to go with her and use her as a valet. My deal with him was provided as long as she continues to show respect. I show respect to everybody in that dressing room. I expect nothing but the same back. And he said that was fine. And for the better part of 2 years, we had a great relationship. She was a lot of fun. We traveled together. We caught up together. We ate together. We, did pretty much everything together and became pretty close friends. Towards the tail end, I guess when she felt that she was tired of the gimmick, screw the company that had invested 2.5 years of time, screw the 20-year veteran that had taken her under his wing and taught her pretty much everything she knew about the business at that point. Screw the fans who had invested a lot of time in watching this group, this tandem work together, because she was dating Tommy Dreamer backstage. She felt that she should be with Tommy Dreamer on stage. And apparently, before she had talked to me, Paul had already told her no. And she wanted me to go fight her battle for her, thinking that I would wield more influence, and that Paul would tell me yes. So I told her, listen, if you've already talked to Paul and he said no, that's pretty much the answer, no. And so we went to the ring that night, and in the entrance that we had done, I would hold the rope open before she turned around and kissed me, and I'd beat my chest, and basically given this young punk center stage. I would have given my right nut to be with Ric Flair, and I'm not putting myself on Ric Flair's level, but in our company, I was the world champion. I would have given my right nut to be with the world champion, whoever that was at the time, to let them walk down to the ring, let me walk down to the ring with them, and give me center stage before they even entered the ring. So I don't think Francine was going to begin to put a price tag on what she was being given. She was being given center stage in the world title picture, and showed no respect for it, showed no thanks whatsoever. And this particular night, after I wouldn't go and fight her battle with Paul that he'd already told her no on, we went to the ring. I held the ropes up before she turned around, put the hard camera directly behind my back so they couldn't see or tell. She brought her face up close enough to mine to look like she was kissing me, and she said, "Fuck you, motherfucker." And she turned and walked away from me. And I don't know if she thought that I was going to turn and smile about it or whatever, but everybody that knows me knows I have a fairly strong temper. And but we were on camera, and as a professional, I went ahead and continued to finish up the story. But when we got back to the dressing room that night, I let her know exactly what I thought of her. And I was at the dressing room, though. And I told Paul that was the end of it, that I'd never walk out there with her again, and I didn't. And that was the first part. The second part was there was an incident that took place in Allentown back in 1997. I was wrestling Tommy Dreamer. Mm-hmm. We had done a thing where we had got post-match heat, beating Dreamer up after the match, and we had Rick Rude, rest of his soul, come out and make the save and chase us off. Francine decided that she was to close to the ringside instead of paddle ring, which enraged Rick Rude. And had he got his hands on her, Barty would have kicked her ass. I mean, I knew who Rick Rude was. But I stuck halfway down the aisle, realizing that she wasn't with me. I turned around and yelled for her to let's go, to get a move on. As I did that, it took me closer to the fans on the right-hand side. Uh-huh. And there was a young girl there, about 15 years old, blonde, standing on the bottom step of the railing, the ring railing, the barrier, the crowd barrier.
I know what you mean, yeah.
And as I turned around, I was about 18 inches, 2 feet away from this girl. She spit right in my face. And as she did that, I was back at her. A lot of stuff I can take. I don't want my mother spit on my face, let alone some other white dress from Allentown that I don't know. Quite frankly, what she's had in her mouth over the last 48 hours, And so as she did this, I looked at her and I said, basically, what the hell are you thinking? And as that happened, her father then brought up a big fat guy, about 350, 380 pounds. He spit in my face and then sucker punched me. Well, he sucker punched me. He turned to disappear into the crowd. I tried to grab him to stop him. He turned around. Security grabbed me and bear hugged me, which is what they were trained to do, from behind, which basically pinned my hands to my side and left me an open target for this guy. He turned around and started kicking the hell out of me in my ribs. And then security turned me around to get me over the railing, kicked me in the elbow a bunch of times, and started those problems with my right elbow. And it's caused me problems to this day. And as this was going on, Francine came running down the aisle, and I can distinctly remember hearing her voice, that shrill, "You motherfucker," trying to get over the railing to go after the girl. And security had to stop her. She witnessed the entire thing. She had written a witness statement for us that night. She wrote another one later under oath about what she had seen. Mm-hmm. When it came time to go to trial, a couple of years later, 2 weeks before we went to trial, we had a case. I mean, if there's a luxury in court when you're telling the truth, you're in pretty good shape. Because, like when you're a little kid, you tell mom and dad a lie. You got to tell 10 lies to cover the first lie.
Right.
And then you begin losing track of the 10 lies that you told to cover the first one. And sooner or later you get busted. That's how we all got busted as kids. Well, Francine she wrote the witness statement. And later wrote one under oath, with the other lawyers. 2 weeks before we were going to go to trial, Paul Heyman's lawyer, because I was being, Paul Heyman was in the building. She called Paul Heyman's lawyer and basically told him that she couldn't testify. And when asked why, she said because she never saw anything. And so Paul Heyman's lawyer was, well, why did you write a witness statement if you never saw it? And she said, I did it because Shane Douglas threatened me with, she basically, I don't know what words, I forget the words, but basically said that I threatened her with violence if she didn't do this, which is absurd. And now the way it plays out in trial, I don't really know much about law, but here in the States, if you're a witness of mine, and you do the same thing after you've given a signed statement as a witness, and later say that you couldn't testify because I threatened you, they can't use her words against me, but they can go to the jury and basically say, look, while she's not testifying, think about that as whatever you want. Now, you have to admit, if you were sitting on a jury, even if we had every fact of the case in our favor, and this, 110-pound girl gets up there and says, I wrote this witness statement that basically lies because this other big, nasty 250-pound wrestler threatened me to beat me up if I didn't. You'd have to think that somebody sitting on the jury would go, why would this girl lie about that? Why would he have done that unless he was guilty of something? So that could have been used as a very potent weapon against me. And I went to court and lost. Luckily for us, their lawyer realized they had a bullshit case and was fearful going forward. And so he accepted a very paltry settlement by Paul Heyman's lawyer. We gave him nothing. Paul Heyman's lawyer gave him a very tiny sum of money. And that was the end of it. As it was, the case cost me $70,000 out of pocket because Paul Heyman never reimbursed me the money he was supposed to. And, but that, that was Francine who, for whatever reason, to try to screw me. I have no idea why she did it. I don't know why she did it. But I know I'll never forget it, and I'll never forgive it. So, I've often said, I hear right now she's doing poorly, doesn't have a pot to piss in. I could care less. If she were homeless on the side of the street sleeping outside tonight, I would care less about it. Because I treated her right for her relationship. Taught her the business. Taught her how to be a star in this business. Taught her how to make money in this business, and that's what she repaid me with. So, leave it for what it is. That's what I feel about her, and that's how it will remain.
Well, we recently had Rob Van Dam on the show, and he said the ECW TV title meant just about as much, if not more, than the ECW World Heavyweight title. Do you agree?
Depends on what time you're saying. I would say at the point that that I was injured with the elbow and had to have the surgery, I pleaded with Paul Heyman to take that title off me because sitting on me for as long as it did while I was injured couldn't contend it. Pretty much did elevate the TV title above it. Whenever I was, or whomever was the champion, whenever the belts were being defended on equal basis, absolutely not. The world title in any company is always worth more than the TV title.
Dan, say anything?
Of course, you dropped the ECW title and later the world title to Taz. Do you have any memories of working with Taz?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I like working with Taz. Taz was always a professional. Working with me, always showed great respect. Always showed the ambition to learn and try to have the best match he could have out there. He and I remain friends to this day. We talk quite often. He's one of those guys that you get along with, and that I get along with in the business, and seem to hit it off well with. But working the match with him, was a lot of fun because he was fairly capable in the ring. Taz could do, pretty confident stuff in the ring. Secondly, his character was so strong, and he played it so well, and we built it so strongly that it was easy for a character like mine, a heel like mine, to play off of. So yeah, I enjoyed working with him very much. Now, the night that we dropped the title in Florida, the world title, there was a lot of hesitation on my part. It had nothing at all to do with Peter Synertia. It had everything to do with the fact that I was owed, at that point, $70,000 and was being given no indication that it was going to be paid back. And, I had began to think heavily about the possibility of popping up on Monday Night with Nitro and dropping that belt to Ric Flair to try to make some of that money back. And in the end, the only reason I didn't had nothing to do with Paul Heyman or ECW. It had to do with the fact that I felt the fans owed it to see that belt change hands in the proper way. Otherwise, that would have made me the same thing that that Shawn Michaels was whenever he forfeited the title away. And I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want it to be a blight on the ECW title. So, out of respect for Taz and the fans and the company itself, I went ahead and worked the match, even though I was owed $70,000 and dropped the title in a professional way. And I'm just damn glad I did. I could have made the money back probably had I gone to Bischoff with that offer, because I know Bischoff would like to have stuck it to Paul. But again, I'm glad I didn't do that, and I'm glad it didn't turn out that way.
Mm-hmm. You, of course, also won the ECW heavyweight title from Terry Funk. How was Terry to work with?
Terry was different to work with. I always enjoyed working with him because, I have respect for him. But you could always, count on Terry throwing, one or two potatoes in the match. You could always, bet that they were, you're going to come out of there lumped up a little bit. But, Terry was always fun to play off with. He was so damn passionate the way he portrayed his character, and so, so to the bone with it, So, again, for a heel character like mine, strong heel characters have to have strong personality, strong characters to play off of, and I certainly had that with both Taz and Terry Funk.
There were rumors on the internet that Al Snow was supposed to win the ECW heavyweight title at WrestlePalooza 98. Any truth to the rumors, and why do you feel that Paul kept the belt on you even though you were injured?
I've heard a couple different things about that. First of all, I don't know if the rumors started. The rumors may have something to do with the fact that I had mentioned in the past that I had vehemently argued with Paul about dropping that title. I felt it was the right thing to do. I thought that Al Snow was certainly capable enough of holding that belt and carrying it. I also felt that I was incapable at that time of carrying it and doing the right thing with it, because my elbow hadn't been operated on. So with all those things being true, I felt that it was just clearly the right thing to throw the belt to. It would have been different if he was incompetent or, I was healthy or whatever. But I do believe that with the things all equal, with everything as they were, that belt should have dropped to him. And I fought vehemently with Paul over that, even at the production meeting the night before, and which Michael Vetter and other people that were there can testify to. And Paul would have none of it. Paul was adamant about that belt staying on me for whatever reason. I've also heard, now in hindsight, that part of the reason was Paul had got a wind from his carnage in WWF that he had known that Al Snow was talking with, and in fact had come to terms with Vince. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. That's one of the things I've heard. So that may be why Paul kept it there. I don't know.
Dan? Did we lose Daniel?
No, hello? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Your question's next, man.
Speaking of Triple Threat, of course, you recently you renewed the Triple Threat in USA Championship Wrestling, but what thoughts do you have, of course, on the one we haven't mentioned so far, Chris Candido?
I think Chris is a special talent in this business. I've always thought that. It's part of the reason I was thrilled to have him as part of the Triple Threat. I also think he also has problems, a lot of people in this business do, with skeleton in his closet, and this is the form of what, we all know that is his problem. I'm happy to say that the last several times I've seen Chris, he's been coherent and sober, clear-eyed, clear-headed. So he tells me that he's cleaned his act up, and I tend to believe him simply because before it was so ubiquitous. He's constantly stunning. It's clearly visible. But like I said, the last half dozen times I've seen him, he's been clear and sober looking to me, so I can't take him to anything other than his word. But as far as his in-ring ability goes, I think Chris is as good as anybody in the business when he's on his game.
Of course, you went to World Championship Wrestling and very quickly formed the Revolution. Why didn't you use the name Triple Threat at that point?
The Triple Threat was basically a play to take a jab at the Four Horsemen.
Mm-hmm.
It was a way to tell the wrestling world, the wrestling fans, that today, meaning back then in 95 or 6 or 7, I think it was 94 we started with Benoit Malenko.
Yeah.
It took 3 great athletes to do it. It used to take 4 to do. So it was a conscious play to use only 3 people, and then after we came up with the idea, or I came up with the idea of using 3, I had to call with the idea, and it took me a long while to sell it to him, to have a strong heel stable like the Four Horsemen. When he finally was convinced of the idea, he asked me for names, and I started bantering names about, and the only thing I could think of was 3. The only thing that sounded good was the number 3, the Triple Threat. And, it worked. It only didn't work, but it got over very well, and it became very established. I think, without trying to sound too pretentious on the thing, I think that it is the Four Horsemen of the 1990s. I was really proud when USA did the reunion a couple months ago. I knew that it had an impact. I didn't realize to what degree it had an impact. And when I saw the reaction of the fans to that night, how strong it was, the signs that it brought, the chants and everything, it really just warmed my heart because when you try to do something, you bust your ass to accomplish something. Sometimes it's hard to quantify or qualify if you succeeded at it. And, this is very difficult because night in, night out, you go out. For us as heels, it's constantly being booed or whatever, so you really can't tell, where reality stops and fantasy begins. But, when you go out to something like that in hindsight, and you see the reaction of the fans, and you see the respect that they're throwing out, and you see the feedback, on the internet and stuff of the show, and the remarks of the fans, it makes you realize once and for all that hard work was paid off.
When you went to WCW in 1999, was it chaotic backstage?
To say the least. Yeah, it was. I'm thankful to WCW for the job, and I'm thankful for the contract they gave me because it basically financially saved my life after the ECW fiasco. I basically would have been in bankruptcy had WCW not come along. I'm thankful for that. As far as the company being run, chaos is putting it mildly. They had some real problems backstage. They had some real problems with talent. But a lot of the problems they could have fixed resolved easily. But you have guys that are going out and saying, no, I'm not going to do a job. Fire them then. But they wouldn't do that. And so a lot of the problems were self-made problems that could have been solved easily, but they didn't. And I think in the end, it was a lot of that kind of stuff they tried to overlook or placate that ended up leading to the demise of the company down the road.
What was your opinion of the Revolution?
A group of some really talented guys. I've always thought highly of all of those guys working with that group. Very capable in the ring, and I think it also, history can show that the reaction from the crowd, the night that we did the stuff with the American flag, stuff which now would be impossible to do because of 9/11.
Right.
The reaction of the crowd was so strong and so solid. Every bit as hot as the night that I threw Gary Wolf down with a broken neck. I knew there was the kind of heat that we could draw money with. And I remember coming back from the ring and just telling the other guys in the Revolution, look, we go to the towns, we better start sticking together. Don't anybody just powder out and go to the gym by themselves because they have nothing else to do or whatever. We better stick together because if not, you can damn sure bet that a couple of rednecks out there see one of us out by ourselves and already a baseball bat on the side of the head because it was such heated anti-American sentiment, that, in hindsight, knowing what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done it. But it stood right then and there. It was pretty heated, and it was a lot of fun. It was the type of thing that could have drawn money if they, focused the energy in the right way. But instead, they chose to put it out there, and then they took that one, split him off from us, and then, from the rest of the Revolution, they were, sort of pushing us one week, not the next, and, real haphazard, but that was what WCW was in those days. It was, push this week, pull next week. So, it's a history lesson at this point because the company obviously is out of business, so I think it all speaks for the same purpose.
What were your initial opinions of Vince Russo?
I had met Vince briefly when I was there in 1990, 1991. And, then again whenever I went there in 95, it was always hard to garner an opinion of him because he was always, protected by Vince. He was always around Vince and, playing off Vince and talking with Vince and, they're opposing guys, so it's hard to form, an individual pick, eventually. So, but when I first met him at WCW, or re-met him, I should say, we hit it off right away, and he seems the type of guy that I like to be around. And he has some real creative ideas and real kooky, crazy ideas. And so, you got to keep his ideas in check sometimes with some wrestling counterbalance, or he'll have, alien babies being spawned out there. So.
Right.
When the radical situation originally became to the forefront, your name was dropped around as being one of the guys who was going to leave. You stayed, but did not wrestle for WCW and made appearances for HCW. So what was behind your decision to stay?
Well, that was, had more to do with Kevin Sullivan than anything else. Kevin Sullivan had come to power at WCW and had let it be known backstage that he basically had hard-ons for all of us, because of Chris and Nancy. And I should probably, explain that. Chris Benmore had basically taken his wife from him. And, started off as a storyline on TV, and then God cares through it, ended up, they're married to this day. Chris and
Nancy.
Woman. So, it was a sore spot for Kevin Sullivan, obviously. And, he let it be known very vocally in the back that he had it out for us. And, I started saying stuff like, at the time my bicep had been torn in a match with Nasty Boy,
Brian Knobs.
And Hugh Morris. A 90% tear off the bone.
Wow.
It says he had surgery to fix. I was back in the ring in under 6 days with a brace on, getting bounced around. I couldn't work full time, but I was performing. Conversely, Lex Luger had a similar tear. His was a 65% tear off the bone. He was in a cast for 3 or 4 months and didn't perform for 8 months. And he shouldn't have. I'm not saying he milked it. I'm saying he shouldn't have. This was a very, very difficult injury to resolve, to get better from. And Kevin Sullivan began telling people in the office, and he got back to me, that I was faking it. And, I said, well, faking it, I take things pretty far because I have an 8-inch skull on my arm. The surgical notes, the insurance payouts from the $26,000 insurance payout to the hospital and everything. So, whenever I fake something, I fake it well. But, with that sentiment, with him coming on board and being the booker, and that's the league, and that's what he's feeling around in the office. He began to circumvent him down and wait around and realize that, this guy coming to power has the power of the pencil behind him. He can make things very difficult for us.
You had introduced the Wall at Sold Out, which was pretty much the night that everything had come to the forefront about the whole changes. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. I know you also booked him in XPW. Any memories of Jerry Tootie?
Yeah, fantastic guy, brother. The nicest guy I ever met in the business. I would put him in the same class category as Ricky Steamboat. He was a truly gentle giant. I mean, he was a huge man that was really eager to make sure that you were fine and happy and everything was cool for you. One time there was something was bothering him one night. I could tell it was bothering him. And I finally pulled him aside. We were in a bar on the road. I pulled him aside. He said, can I talk to you for a minute? He pulled me down away from everybody. And I told him was eating at him. And he said, look, he goes, because he lived in New Jersey around Bam Bam. And Bam Bam was off the road at the time. He said, look, I know you and Bam Bam have been friends for a long time, but I don't want to see that friendship end, man. I was in the dark. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no idea if there was even any problems in friendship. And when he told me that, I called Bam Bam, and Bam Bam was like, no, I said this one thing to him one time. And, maybe like one of these things that he made a mountain out of a molehill. But when Jerry heard it, he blew it completely out of portion in his mind, and was concerned for both of us. He didn't want to see our friendship end. And so he took, he was taking both of us aside and giving us these lectures and, trying to make sure that the friendship, survived and lasted. That was Jerry. He was always concerned about making sure that you were cool, and everything was okay for you. And, he's one of the guys that we've lost a lot of guys in this business, but none of them bothered me, I think. Like Jerry's did, because he was such a good guy.
Did you think the Bischoff and Russo pairing would work?
Yes,
he
did. And I thought that because they both bring very different talents to the table. Vince brings a very strong managerial style. Vince is very aloof at. Vince, he's no more manager than the man in the moon. But he's very creative and very talented that way, so that they would work well together. And I still think they could have worked well together. I think what happened was, people that disliked Vince, i.e. guys like Kevin Nash and stuff that, were being pushed to the third, suddenly were being asked to be favors for other people, knew that they had an ally with Kevin Nash. So they went to Kevin and started bending his ear and started driving wedges between, I think there were a lot of people, again, that agenda that I spoke about earlier. People that had those agendas that were, pushing wedges between the two of them, because if they worked together and it worked well, it would have meant bad things for a whole lot of them, a lot of those guys. And, so I think that, yes, there was, I think those two worked very well together, and I was very excited about it. And I think the initial concepts that they had, sort of bear out what I'm saying. I mean, the New Blood angle, had it been done properly, it would have worked very well, I think. It was pitting the new against the old. I think it was a strong idea, and could have worked very well. But again, only can work well if the main names are going to go with it. When Hogan refused to go out there and lay down for people that have done it 100 times for him, there's going to be a problem. Flair, only half-assed wanted to work with me. It could have been a huge money draw, I believe, if sold properly. But again, that gets back to who's in charge. And I think if Bischoff had come in and basically said, look, guys, screw it, screw all your agendas. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going. Instead of trying to play politician, hey, Rick, how you doing? How you doing, Terry, and all that kind of stuff. To me, I'm from the school of thought. Not that you have to treat anybody disrespectfully, but if I'm paying you and paying you well, you have no bitch. I ask you to do something for me. As long as not go out there and get naked and act like an imbecile. If there's any context to what we do, I don't see how somebody can really, in an argument, raise an issue without being asked to lose in a business that's fake. So it's, I think there were a lot of reasons why it didn't work. And I don't think the main reason was Bischoff and Russo not getting along. But I think in the end, that's what I'm working together on things and patting each other on the back and stuff. So I don't think that was a huge issue, to be honest with you.
You finally had a match with Ric Flair after years of calling him out. How did you enjoy your matches with Ric Flair?
I only had one with him.
Right, at Slamboree.
Yeah, I thought the finish was extremely weak. Bringing his son out to still being involved. I thought that was a poor way to go. But I also understand that the factors that were being weighed in. There was a lot of pretty heady stuff that was said over the years by both of us. The one thing that I was extremely upset with was that they gave me zero time to establish my character, get my character over. I mean, let's face it, every WCW fan not only knew who Ric Flair was, but knew him intimately. It wasn't since they were kids. They didn't have to do anything with Rick except just let him talk. Just let him do what he has to do. And with me, on the other hand, they brought me in, and half the fans knew who I was, and they were extremely excited to see me there. And the other half were completely in the dark. They had never seen me, or until they heard the name. It took a while, but just to see me coming to the curtain, they didn't really know, a lot of them, who I was, or who the franchise was, or whatever. And I think that really weighed heavily towards the success of the match or the non-success of it, whichever way you look at it.
Speaking of feuds, of course, you had a couple of good feuds in WWE, Billy Kidman and Hugh Morris, who you mentioned earlier on. What memories do you have of those two feuds?
Very favorable. Both the guys, I think they're both hard workers. I think they both have, Hugh Morris, for as big as he is, was impressed with the hell out of me how he moves. And they're both good guys, so it was a lot of fun working with both of them. I think that had we been given the opportunity to fully establish our characters, not just me, but those guys as well, instead of Hugh Morris being put out there and being called Hugh Morris, then Colonel Rection, and then this, and then that, and there was that constant flow of names, changing the gimmick every other week and stuff that, sort of hurt him. But, in a nutshell, I think that, I guess in a nutshell, what I'd say about WCW at that time, to partly answer a lot of the questions you have on the place is, had they presented the talent on a silver platter and pushed it the way they should have pushed it, guys like Hugh Morris and Billy Kidman are extremely talented guys. You have to push them and, waited 6 months for them to get over. I think they would have gotten over fairly quickly. Had you given the opportunity to, but they weren't given that opportunity. So, again, one of the factors I think that led to the demise of the company. I think talent-wise at that time, if you, as a booker, if you were to say to me, you would take WWF's locker room at that time, you could take WCW's, and everything else being equal, I would take the WCW dressing room at that time in a heartbeat, hands down.
Wow. Any memories of your tag team partner, Buff Bagwell?
Very few. We weren't together very long. I've known Buff for years. We've been together a couple times. I think the first time we were together as a tag team there, Buff worked very hard. And I think he did the last time too, but the last time we were there, I think he had a lot more on his plate, with stuff with his wife and all that kind of stuff that I didn't want to get involved in.
We recently had Medusa on the show. When she got to, at the end of the WCW part of her interview, she spoke quite negatively about the scaffold match that you had, saying that Terry Wilson was just, quite frankly, too scared to be in the match. Would you agree with those sentiments?
Absolutely. Yeah, there were so many things wrong with that match. First of all, it's supposed to be a scaffold match, not a bouncing platform match. That was the first one. So it made it very difficult to get up there and work the match because, you take a step on the fan was bouncing like a trampoline. Secondly, everybody knows anything about metal knows that the metal metal when it's torqued, i.e. being bounced, is very different. You can't, if a piece of metal has a 1,000-pound weight limit to it, that changes rapidly and very quickly and drastically when you begin to bounce it and bend it and move it up and down in a quick fashion. And those pieces of, such a wide, big, and long platform that even though it was steel, it was bouncing and moving a lot of weight, and the stress that we placed on those joints and stuff, quite frankly, scared me. When we got up and that thing started moving, now mind you, we had never seen that till that day. We didn't get a chance to practice on any platform or on it or anything. We had practiced on a little real platform at the school that they had, the camp that they had there. But it was nothing like what we had there. That was the first problem. It's completely unsafe, I thought. Secondly, it was so big that when you had the combatants at different ends and stuff, it was very difficult. It took too much time to get tied back up. So if I was on the far end and Billy Kidman was over on the left side, it took me 35, 40 seconds just to walk over to him, to get to him. So it made for lulls in the match. Tori was completely out of her element in that. I mean, you can't blame the girl. She was never trained as a wrestler. She wasn't trained like Medusa was. She had very limited in-ring training. But I'll say this for her. I never heard the girl say no to anything. I never heard her say, I can't or whatever. She would try anything you gave her, and which could have been very dangerous. In fact, one night there was a case where I basically broke character because I thought she could get hurt very badly, and she had run out into the crowd and was being stalked where she was supposed to half fall over a railing about 25 feet up. And there until I got there to pull her back on, then I would get thrown over through the table down below. And when she got up there and she went over, she disappeared from sight. And had she missed that or slipped, she would have been hurt very, very badly. So I broke character and pulled her right up there. And, unfortunately, it was way too soon.
Well, I'm getting a question here from Rusty Brooks. He just instant messaged me, not the old WWF driver, but actually got from the forums. He wants to know your memories of the Viagra on a pole match.
There is hardly any. I remember they had done the vignette with me and Tori, being in the bedroom and me basically saying stuff about, I don't understand it, I'm unable to perform. And it was their attempt to try to infuse some brevity into the character, which I was all for. I wanted the parameters being put to the character. The character had grown old, tiresome, and I wanted to be updated and freshen up a bit. But that kind of stuff was absurd. That kind of stuff makes people guffaw at home, not buy a ticket.
Right. All right. What can you tell us when you guys were backstage and you obviously were hearing about the sale? Did you have any idea it would be Vince?
No, I was off the time with a broken wrist.
Right.
I heard the rumors, and quite frankly, I thought they couldn't be true. A, because of antitrust laws, which I still question how they did it, because of the antitrust laws of this country. I think it could be a case that nobody's made the phone call yet. That might be one thing that might change. But they, that was one thing. Secondly, I didn't think Vince had money for it because he had failed earlier, to be able to do it. But in hindsight, seeing how the deal was made, what went down, Vince basically bought the company with their money and made a profit. So, I think he was damned intelligent for having done it. He pulled a major coup. If I were a stockholder in Time Warner AOL, I think I'd be asking some serious questions with my lawyers. And, there clearly was something else going on there.
Absolutely, absolutely. How long were you under contract with Time Warner after the sale of WCW?
Just my contract ended up last April. So I was under contract for about a year and a half, almost 2 years.
Wow. When you returned, you did Maryland Championship Wrestling, reappearing with Ricky Steamboat. Was that a fun experience?
I'm sorry, whenever...
Maryland Championship Wrestling, Ricky Steamboat. Yeah.
It's phenomenal. I've always thought the world of Ricky and respected the hell out of him. He's a truly intelligent guy when it comes to his business. He's a truly talented performer, and he's just a damn good guy. Just a lot of fun to be around. Very, very comfortable to be around because he's such a genuine person and so, so respectful. That for me, it was a blessing in my career, and to be close to when I was. But we had a lot of fun that night in Maryland.
Of course, after WCW, you also appeared in MLW. How did you enjoy your appearance then? And what can you tell us of the so-called breaking news that's been reported about MLW taking another hiatus?
Well, the second part of that question, I couldn't quite hear what I was breaking about.
Okay. The first part was about your original appearance in MLW a long, long time ago, and the second part was what can you tell us of course, a couple of news sites are reporting that today Court Bowers announced something about the backers pulling out of MLW and a future being bleak, and of course the show being cancelled and whatnot. Can you explain anything about that at all?
All I know is pretty much what you just said. That the investors had pulled out, and that there was a lot of money that needs to be to run. With any wrestling company, it takes a lot of money, and that the investors apparently had gotten bad returns on other investments that they had made that came back. The quarterly reports came back recently and forced them to basically reevaluate were they able to continue, investing in MLW. And I guess the answer was no. It doesn't sound extremely good at this point, but I also think that the way that the message that was left to me from Court Bauer today was, that he definitely looks forward to working again in the near future, but he had no promises to make. So, it's.
What can you tell us about your role in XPW?
Well, I was supposed to be the booker there. When I got hired, I basically explained to Rob that they had provided, there wasn't a whole lot of, swerving of it being, paid. In other words, you told them my face and we're going to do something and then not do it. It's very difficult to book from 1,500 miles away. Whenever I'm emailing in and faxing in and calling in certain angles and vignettes to be played and there's certain camera shots to be included or excluded, and to not know if they were really put on there or not until the following week when the tape went out. Well, at that point, it's too late. What the tape is longer, then it's changes that need to be made. I can't make them then. So.
Wow.
What happened with the downfall and the ultimate closure of XPW?
Well, to be honest, I don't know that because I wasn't out in Australia after they, after they had left, after they left Pittsburgh show. All I know is that we had the next show was already lined up and announced, and tickets were on sale. And in like a week or 10 days' time, we had sold more tickets than we had done previously for the entire pre-sale before. So in 1 week, we had doubled. We had surpassed the entire pre-sale of the first show. And we did it was very profitable, probably the most profitable show in this company's history, the first time in Pittsburgh. So we were heading for a very good house for the second show in there. And, I get a phone call from my assistant promoter that asking if I had canceled the show. I said, no, why? He said, well, it's being announced and it's being promoted on XPW.com that they had canceled it. And so right away I call out there and I get a Rob on the phone. And he tells me basically, well, yeah, we canceled because we don't want to end up losing a crap load of money and bouncing checks to anybody again. I told him, Rob, you're insane. We have a better pre-show right now than the first show. And he was, you're kidding. I said, yeah. He goes, well, just uncancel the show. I said, you can't uncancel the canceled show. Once it's canceled, you can't create that kind of confusion in the marketplace. At that point, I just thought, you know what? I put my hands in the air and I tap out. I can't. My temper is great to allow myself to continue being used like that and is utilized. So that was it for me.
We talked about TNA, your initial appearance in TNA, but one of your first feuds when you got to TNA was against Raven. How did you enjoy? Well, of course you had worked with Raven in ECW, but how did you enjoy working with Raven all around?
I do. I do it very much because, again, like I said about people earlier, he's very passionate about what he does. Sometimes almost to the point of being a pain in the rear end, but he's very passionate and he works very hard in the ring. He brings some really good ideas that need to be tempered down, but some guys you have chemistry with, other guys you don't. Raven is one of the guys that I have very good chemistry with. So we ended up having even pretty good performances when we worked together.
Of course, you're now working on the new franchise with Tracy and Michael Shane. And this is a two-part question that's been sent in by a guy off the 3SW forums. He wants to know, the first part of it is, why don't you use the name The Triple Threat?
Good question. And it was thrown about, and we had debated quite some time on it. Both sides of the argument came from me. The pro of using it is an established name. It's well known. It has a great history behind it. But some of the negatives, and there are considerable negatives, the negatives being that it hasn't been seen on national television since 1999 or so, maybe before that. There was a strong belief that much like the Four Horsemen, much like the NWO, that had been so because it was so over at a certain point, and now that it was out of sight and out of mind for so long, it was probably best to keep it, rather than try to, resurrect something, and then unfairly have the other kids, this was my big concern. I didn't want them to be going, Michael Shane's okay, there's no Chris Candido, or he's no Chris Benoit, or he's no Dean Malenko. I didn't want any unfair comparisons being made like that. So, I do feel that the company's been out of sight, out of mind long enough. I think it might look like there will be a lot of fans out there, I think, looking at like they're trying to capitalize off an old, dead name. And that's why I felt it's probably better to just go ahead and start with something new. Plus, by doing that, there's no preconceived notion. There's nobody going to be going, well, this guy sort of wrestled like Bigelow, or he looks like Shane, or whatever. So there was a lot of thought put into that. It's a good question.
And the second part of the question that has been submitted is that, of course, as it's the new franchise, how much booking and submitting of ideas for this group are you doing yourself?
Well, it's hard to say. It's hard to put a number on it, a percentage on it. But I'll say this: mostly every idea that we have done so far, thus far as the new franchise, has been run by me or discussed at least in general terms before we've done them, which is to me it was nice. They value my input and they respect my input enough to keep it and use it and ask for it and everything. So that was all good. But it's refreshing to have that kind of input and to be asked.
I mentioned it to you a little bit earlier, just linking into the question about Chris Candido. But speaking a little bit more, you did recently reform the triple threat in USA Pro. Do you have any memories of that evening?
Yeah, like I said earlier about that evening, it was great because the fans were so strong behind it, and that was the only thing that was really pushed for that show, the only thing advertised. And there was the largest crowd that was ever put into the Elks Lodge. So, considering the considerable ECW history there, I think that's saying something that really made me proud because it finally brought home to me that what we had all worked our asses off towards the triple threat finally paid off and something we could look at and quantify and say, look, it was established. I think now we can look back at it and say it's like one of the big things in the history of the business that people will remember 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
You mentioned very early in the interview.
In other words, we left a legacy. I think that's something I'm proud of.
You mentioned very early in the interview, the last part of the interview, you had interest in stepping out of the ring as much because of your age and that you don't want to be sticking up to places, I think you put it.
Right.
Are we starting to see that a little bit now, or do you think you still have a couple more years left in you?
Well, I'm in pretty good shape right now. I'm in better shape than I've been in probably the last 7 or 8 years, and so right now I feel good. But I'm just always one injury away from being back to square one. But I would say right now there's at least a year and a half left in me, maybe a year, before I start really completely moving out of the scenes. But you are beginning to see me segue more behind the scenes now, going more backstage and stuff. So I'm beginning to prepare for that after ring career.
Are you working backstage with TNA?
Yes. Just character development and teaching young guys and girls how to promo and camera angles and storylines and all that sort of thing.
Rumor has it that you're going to appear on the NCW show, which is over here in the UK sometime this year. Is that true?
I don't know. I've not heard that, so you're on.
Yeah, there was because this NCW thing just kind of popped up, and no one knows anywhere where it came from. No one knows who's promoting it and whatnot. And you're the guy, and basically they've put the talisman on, and you're the guy that they're promoting at the moment. So thought I'd let you know in case you didn't know. But.
Interesting. Well, it's not me promoting it. That's that's for sure. And I don't know anything about it, so I can't. I'm not being coy. I just don't know anything about it. I've not heard. But I'm not, as far as I know, I'm not booked unless my webmaster had booked me. So.
Well, Shane, we can't thank you enough for this interview. You far exceeded our expectations. You've given us more than we ever could have expected. You've gone far above and beyond the call of duty, and we just can't thank you enough for one of the greatest interviews I've ever conducted.
Hey, this is the Queen of Extreme, Francine, and you are listening to the Interactive Interview.